Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto x My Hero Academia harem. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Author-Skythe and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Uzumaki, stop thinking about stupid things. Home. Came the gruff command from a burly man resembling a mountain with his massive brown beard. He set down a hefty beam and wiped his sweat-drenched forehead. They were in a bustling construction zone where a new building was taking shape. Come inside and collect your pay, kid. You did well, he added, tossing the towel over his shoulder as he headed toward the exit, joined by his fellow laborers. The Uzumaki mentioned by the worker continued his labor, breaking a large stone with a pickaxe. He calmly slung the pickaxe over his shoulder and removed his yellow helmet, revealing a head of spiky blonde hair. The boy appeared to be around 14 years old, with a lean and athletic frame, blue eyes, and cat-like markings on his cheeks. Bandages covered his forehead, concealing his right eye and part of his cheek. Standing at 1.60 meters tall, he possessed a physique well suited for hard work. His attire consisted of thick dark pants and a sweat-soaked white shirt. Without a word but with a relaxed expression, he placed the pickaxe and helmet aside. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he let out a sigh. Walking alongside his fellow laborers, he made his way to the exit, where a young woman was distributing payment checks to the workers. She appeared to be in her early 20s and was the foreman's attractive daughter. When it was his turn in line, she handed the check to the teenager. Great job, Naruto-kun. Hope to see you again tomorrow. Thank you, Yumi-san, Naruto replied with a slight smile, accepting the check. He left the construction site and strolled through the streets, reflecting on the stark differences between the worlds. The advanced technology here seemed excessive to him, but it came with a heavy reliance on it. Continuing on his path, he eventually reached a store and went inside to buy some drinks. Once inside, he discreetly entered the bathroom. After a brief moment, an adult figure with dark hair emerged, paid for the beers, and left the store. In a puff of smoke, he transformed back into his previous appearance. He stashed the drinks in his backpack and made his way to the lower parts of the city. He paid little attention to the women offering services on street corners or the menacing individuals who quickly cleared his path. In his hometown, it was common knowledge that bothering him was a bad idea. After all, he had once broken an idiot's arm who attempted to rob him, proving that he was not to be trifled with. As he reached a set of apartments, he ascended to the top floor. Upon opening the door, a dim, modestly furnished apartment greeted him. I'm home, he announced, not expecting a reply, as he retrieved the drinks from his backpack and began to drink without reservation. Approaching the window, he gazed silently at the city. With his lone visible eye, he removed a necklace with a locket from around his neck. Opening it, he beheld a photograph of himself at the tender age of 3, cradling a 1-year-old girl with fiery red hair. Oh, how melancholic, you're almost making me shed a tear, remarked a female voice from within his head. Ignoring the voice, he carefully stowed the locket and continued drinking, already on his third can. Do you intend to ignore me forever? Inquired the voice, its tone growing more sinister and alluring. Only until I pass away, replied the boy simply, his gaze drifting up to the starry sky. However, his reverie was interrupted when his surroundings suddenly shifted and he found himself in a dark place with seemingly endless walls and ankle-deep water. Your words wound my heart deeply, and you have no inkling. From the shadows of the dim cavern emerged a figure, a striking, statuesque woman standing at 1.85 meters tall. She possessed fiery red hair, pale skin, and slanted blood-red eyes that bore a resemblance to the markings on the Uzumaki. What was most striking, perhaps, was her unclothed form, a figure that could only be described as divine. Her ample E-cup breasts defied gravity, complemented by a small waist and generous hips, which flowed gracefully into long, shapely legs. With a wicked smile, she approached and gently caressed the boy's hair as he remained seated in the water. You claim I lack a heart, retorted the blonde, his gaze now filled with anger as the woman's smile grew even more sinister. My little Naruto-chan, remember your place. Her smile darkened as large fox ears sprouted over her hair and 9 colossal tails materialized behind the woman. She ran her hand over the blonde's face, only to stop abruptly. Grasping his neck forcefully, she compelled him to meet her gaze. You're merely my plaything, a pitiful creature I could crush at will, but what if I decide to do so? She drew her face nearer to the teenagers, her smile now filled with lust. Their lips almost touched, their warm breaths mingling. However, the Renegan's grin shattered when the teenager delivered a powerful kick to her stomach, sending her tumbling to the ground amid the water. The kitsune displayed no apparent reaction to the blow. We have a deal. You won't harm her. The Uzumaki, still kneeling on the ground, shouted forcefully. As he attempted to rise, the Renegan's foot prevented him from doing so. Subdued, he could only glare at the kitsune, who responded with a mocking smile. I understand, and as part of our agreement, you are under my control. My commands must be followed without objections or resistance. The kitsune's tails moved slowly, encircling both of them. She silently withdrew her foot from the teenager and knelt beside him, leaning close to his ear. Because you belong to me now and forever, she whispered, her voice dark and low, just before everything plunged into darkness for the Uzumaki, who closed his eyes. Opening his eyes again, he found himself back in his apartment. Looking around, he saw that he had already finished drinking the drinks and the alcohol had already begun to act. Feeling the heaviness in his body, he sighed, the only way to drown. The pain, with alcohol, I already understood why the veterans drank so much. Getting up from the window frame of the house, he threw himself onto his bed and just looked at the ceiling. Little by little, he closed his eyes and then fell asleep. Chapter 2. Another day, the same routine. The Uzumaki rose from his bed, enduring a brief hangover that vanished within minutes, courtesy of being the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki, or at least a part of it. The memories were still vivid in his mind. Flashback. Konoha was engulfed in flames, the onslaught of the most formidable tailed beast wreaking havoc upon the village. Shinobi gave their lives, whether in combat with the tailed beast or in the rescue of as many people as possible. Ugh. A 3-year-old blonde boy was carried by a 16-year-old teenager with spiked silver hair. The teenager's left eye was concealed and a mask concealed the lower part of his face. The young man had to jump and maneuver multiple times to evade collapsing buildings. "Kakashi ni, where are we going?" shouted the boy on the shinobi's back, who remained focused on the 9-tailed beast being battled and ultimately sealed by a colossal toad summoned by his master. The boy vanished in a golden flash. "I must take you to sensei," responded the teenager, giving his all to run as swiftly as possible, weaving through the burning structures. He disregarded the pleas for help from civilians caught in the crossfire between the Biju and the shinobi. However, the boy listened intently to the calls for aid. "That's where we need to help them." His cries fell on deaf ears as his older brother continued to run. Gritting his teeth, the blonde boy considered leaping off the shinobi's back, but his grip tightened. "We can't leave them." "Stop. We can't save them all. You are more important," the teenager declared with resolve before lapsing into silence. He shot a serious glance at the Uzumaki, who remained silent before letting out a loud scream. They pressed forward, and the young Haddock led them into Konoha's forests, just in time for a sort of golden force field to materialize in the form of countless golden chains. The two boys watched as the mighty 9-tailed beast was ensnared by hundreds of these golden chains, emanating from a wary Kushina Uzumaki, who cradled a bundle in her arms. "Oka-san." Jumping off the shinobi's back, the Uzumaki rushed to his mother, kneeling beside her. Naruto-chan, the red-haired woman, visibly fatigued, greeted her eldest son with a tired smile. She lowered the bundle in her arms, revealing a tiny baby only a few minutes old. "Look, this is Natsumi, your little sister," she whispered weakly, presenting the newborn to her son. Nearby, the yondaime Hokage was meticulously weaving a series of complex seals. "Well done, Kakashi," the blonde Namikaze expressed his gratitude, patting his student's shoulder. Kakashi, still catching his breath, nodded solemnly. He then adopted a more serious demeanor, conjuring an altar and summoning a spectral figure behind it, a sight visible only to him and the captive beast, which struggled mightily against its restraints. Naruto the Hokage called his son's attention and approached him. "Odo-san," Naruto responded slowly as he received his sister, gently placed by his father on the altar. He was positioned in front of the altar, and his father, with a calm smile, lovingly patted his head. "Minato, wait. Not them. You'll burden them with a weight no one should bear." Kushina's desperate cry attempted to reach her children, but her focus remained on restraining the Biju. Any movement on her part risked everyone's lives. Naruto looked at his father with fear, but Minato made him meet his gaze squarely. "You remember what we discussed, right, a shinobi?" he began with a weakening voice, locking eyes with his son. "You must always watch over your village, no matter the cost," he concluded, reaffirming the words of his father. Minato smiled weakly. "Indeed, now, as Hokage, I appoint you a shinobi of Konoha." Rising to his feet, he turned his back to his son and faced the captive-tailed beast. He clapped his hands together and formed a hand seal. "As my final decree as Hokage, you must promise me the following conditions." Blood trickled from his mouth as he felt his vision blur. "Protect and care for your village." "I promise," came the feeble response from the boy, his head lowered. Despite his tender age, he was keenly aware of the harsh realities of the world around him. He understood that they were now in peril, and his father would be tasked with resolving it, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. "But you will always prioritize the safety of your comrades, and you'll be willing to do whatever it takes to ensure the village thrives and enjoys peace no matter the cost," the Hokage declared solemnly. He felt the touch of Shinigami's hand passing through him and proceeding directly toward the Kyuubi. Another hand traversed him, repeating the same action. "I promise," the boy affirmed, closing his eyes, though silent tears welled up within him. He had to open his eyes when he witnessed his father sinking to his knees. Slowly, the Hokage turned to face his son. Ryuhei raised his hands, removing his blood-stained bandana, and approached to secure it on the young Uzumaki's forehead. "You will protect your family, your Oka-san, and your younger sister." Gradually, the light in his eyes dimmed. "I promise." The blonde shouted, witnessing a brilliant radiance before him. The last thing he saw was his father's proud smile. The nine-tailed beast split into two, one a black sphere with red details and the other orange with a white flash. The darker sphere pierced the boy's chest, causing searing heat within him. As for the orange sphere, it descended upon the little girl on the altar, who began to cry as it merged with her. Silence fell as Minato's body gradually crumpled, only to be caught by the young blonde, who clutched his father's lifeless form. Tears streamed uncontrollably, and with a heart-wrenching cry, he mourned his father's sacrifice. And FLASHBACK. Chapter 3. Frowning, the shinobi rose from his resting place, heading to the bathroom. In front of the mirror, he removed the bandage from his forehead, revealing an old bandana imprinted with the leaf symbol. It bore a scratch that betrayed his status as a renegade ninja. Even with his right eye concealed, he ran his hand over it in thought. With a sigh, he undressed, revealing a body honed by years of rigorous training, yet adorned with prominent scars, notably a deep one crossing his chest, inflicted by a sword. He gently traced his finger along the scar, lost in contemplation, before proceeding to take a calm shower. Minutes passed, and the shinobi emerged onto the streets, wearing a white sweatshirt, dark pants, blue shoes, and an aged brown backpack slung over his shoulder. Ignoring the people around him, he continued on his path. He had spent over 6 months in the city and knew it was time to move on. Staying in one place was a luxury he couldn't afford. Being overly cautious was a hard-earned habit, but that was the life of a shinobi. In silence, he arrived at a train station. He perked up as he heard some commotion in the distance, catching sight of a giant man engaged in battle with a colossal woman whose attire, from his perspective, appeared somewhat suggestive. Wasn't that guy already defeated before? A man in a suit nearby mused aloud. Instead of retreating to safety, the crowd gathered in front of the spectacle, treating it as if it were a show. But what was it really? A clash between good and evil? An act of heroism by the giant heroine? Not from the shinobi's perspective, who observed this with annoyance, it appeared to be merely a spectacle, perhaps training, until a genuine catastrophe struck, turning it into a grave matter, not in material terms, but in something far more serious. As someone inquired, how can that villain roam free? The system was far from perfect, often providing an easy escape route for those with connections. Taking these individuals and imprisoning them seemed like a futile endeavor. What was the point? The shinobi understood that such giants had already caused fatalities with their actions. Shinobi kept prisoners only if they possessed crucial information or something valuable to offer. It might have sounded cruel and even inhumane, but when had doing what was right ever been well regarded? Shaking off his thoughts, the blonde with bandages merely observed the ongoing battle and resumed his walk, choosing to ignore the spectacle. He checked the time on a nearby clock and decided to wait for the train to continue its route out of the city. Now who's the bitch? The blonde-haired giant heroine delivered a powerful blow to her opponent, sending him crashing to the ground. She wore a smug smile as cameras focused on their confrontation. But just as she was about to land the final blow, she was struck by a car thrown by a shark-nosed giant. Dazed, the woman staggered, clutching her forehead from the impact. "Hey, wait." She growled in frustration as she watched the villain make a hasty retreat towards the subway station. Grinning wickedly, he slipped into the crowd, seizing a handful of people as hostages, 3 children and 1 adult. "Back off, or these civilians will be harmed." He raised his hands, showcasing his hostages to the onlookers who cried out for help. "Damn coward." The heroine found herself compelled to maintain a safe distance to prevent harm to the hostages, cursing her own momentary lapse of caution. She swallowed hard. "Just release them, and we can work something out." At the subway station, it was evident that nearly everyone had evacuated, with the exception of one individual who closely monitored the unfolding events. Irater. A single misstep, and it's all over for them. Threatening with raised hands, several of the newly arrived heroes kept their distance, awaiting the arrival of negotiation experts. Meanwhile, at a leisurely pace, Naruto distanced himself from the chaos spawned by the spectacle, which now teetered on the brink of tragedy. He felt no obligation to intervene. "Please, help. I don't want to die," cried out one of the children, a 6-year-old girl with blonde hair. She sobbed and struggled within the grasp of the giant, who, with a sense of amusement, lifted her with his free hand, separating her from the other hostages. However, the girl's distress unleashed a sudden powerful sound wave caused by her crying. Irritated by the deafening noise that only intensified his earache, the giant forcefully seized her, causing onlookers to tense up. Brat, she silenced the girl, extending her palm to grip the child's throat between her fingers. I'll give you a real reason to scream. Applying a gentle squeeze, she unleashed the girl's shriek, a sound that seemed to carry for miles, rendering everyone helpless. Meanwhile, the blonde shinobi on the ground paused briefly, gazing at the earth, before shifting his attention back to the towering giant who held the hostages hostage. To prove I'm not joking, I'll dispose of this kid. Slipping his hand into his pocket, the shinobi continued his march, his expression dark, deliberately turning away from the unfolding drama. Stop. Mount Lady couldn't endure the girl's agonizing screams any longer and charged toward the giant, who tightened his grip on the girl's throat, causing blood to splatter all around. Time seemed to freeze when the giant's hand was cleanly severed, releasing a geyser of blood. Ah! Howling in pain, he clutched the bloody stump where his hand once was. Despite his agony, he realized he had been using the hand that held his other hostages, but now it was gone. The girl who had been screaming just moments ago lay on the ground amidst the other hostages, all of them fixated on a shadowy figure standing before them. This teenager wielded a short sword, about 40 centimeters in length, with a dark handle, its blade stained with blood. That's enough. The blonde turned calmly to face the giant, who was preoccupied with the loss of his hand. I won't allow you to harm them. With those words, he pointed his blood-soaked sword at the enraged villain, who roared in fury. 273. Chapter 4. Damn brat. Using his remaining hand, he attempted to crush the shinobi who refused to stay still. Swiftly, the shinobi leaped into action, reaching the giant's arm and dashing along it until he reached the giant's face. In an instant, the giant's head was separated from his body. Everyone present was left in shock by the gruesome scene that had just unfolded. A Class B villain had been brutally slain, and the massive body, whose grip had produced a dull thud, lay lifeless. Blood began to spread across the area. Nearby, the blonde shinobi calmly sheathed his sword and secured it in his backpack. Within moments, something or someone landed on the shattered pavement. With a solemn expression, the teenager raised his gaze to see the newly arrived individual. This tall figure had blonde hair, featuring two prominent strands that resembled horns. His eyes were dark, with only the blue pupils shining brightly. He wore a blue suit adorned with white and red markings. Without a word, the blonde teenager stared unwaveringly at All Might, who had apparently arrived just in the nick of time. You'd better do this the hard way, or his eyes flashed menacingly as the ground beneath him cracked slightly and his muscles showed a subtle increase. It will be the hard way. With these words, he locked eyes with the teenager, who displayed no fear, hesitation, or remorse for taking a life and now standing before one of the world's mightiest heroes. Slowly, the blonde reached for his sword, taking a moment to survey his surroundings. His attention, however, remained fixed on the girl who, aside from rushing to her father and embracing him tightly while shedding tears of happiness, turned her gaze toward the number one hero. He carefully removed the sword from its sheath and placed it on the ground before raising his hands in surrender. Somewhere beneath the city, in an underground concrete room, Naruto sat in the center of the space. He occupied a metal chair, his hands and wrists encased in substantial pure steel handcuffs. With an empty expression, he stared ahead at a glass window. He was aware that people were observing from behind that glass. He had been in this place for an hour and 30 minutes. Letting out a solitary sigh, he muttered under his breath, "You know, I'm surprised." The teenager displayed no shock when, seated at the table opposite him, the kitsune of the Nine Tails made an appearance this time. She was attired in a dark kimono, seemingly on a whim. "Someone like you coming to the rescue of a kid, is that stone heart of yours softening?" She taunted as she hopped off the table to inspect her surroundings. In this spiritual form, she could only be perceived by her Jinchuriki. The blonde didn't dignify her with a response, simply continuing to gaze at the floor while awaiting someone to arrive and inform him of his fate. The notion of prison was the foremost thought in his mind. Interrupting his thoughts, he felt the Renegan position herself behind him, encircling her arms around his neck. Does Uzumaki Naruto believe he can find redemption? He smiled darkly, resting his cheek against the Jinchuriki's. Do you think that saving children and rescuing cats from trees will erase all that you've done? My dear Naruto-kun, your hands are stained, and we both know those stains never fade, no matter what we do. Humans have this notion that all their actions can be forgiven, or that they can find redemption through good deeds. Without releasing his hold on Naruto, he tightened his grip slightly, human sentimentality at its core. They believe that everything will be fine in the end, even when they know that a dark and sorrowful destiny awaits them. He spoke calmly as he gradually increased the pressure of his grip on the Uzumaki. Long was the whispered response of the shinobi, who only wished for the nine-tailed beast to vanish. The beast indeed disappeared as if it had never existed. Simultaneously, the room's door swung open, revealing All Might. I've just arrived, young Uzumaki, but I'm already leaving. The imposing hero calmly pulled out a chair and sat across from the shinobi, who kept his gaze down. The hero donned a yellow formal suit and held a briefcase. The sixth user of One for All opened the briefcase, removed some files, and placed them on the table. Naruto looked up at the files on the table, then back at the older blonde. "What awaits me now?" he asked calmly, breaking the heavy silence. In response to his question, the hero sighed and opened one of the files. "You're facing several charges," he explained seriously, his hands folded as he looked at the teenager, whose expression remained impassive. "You're not only guilty of first-degree murder but also forgery. You aren't registered anywhere, not even a birth certificate with your name on it. And does that matter now?" he asked calmly, maintaining his composure. "No, that doesn't matter at this moment. However, for taking a life, you're looking at a minimum of 30 years to life in prison, which could be reduced since you're still a minor," the number one hero responded quickly. "In the eyes of the authorities, I killed a man. But from my perspective, I stopped a desperate man from harming a girl, and I couldn't stand by and let that happen," he sighed, glancing at the table for a moment before returning his gaze to the hero. "I don't care about the rules imposed by the society. I have my own code, and one of its principles is protecting children from harm," he said seriously, locking eyes with the hero who remained silent. "While I may not agree with your methods, I must express gratitude for what you've done. You saved those people," the hero acknowledged. However, his expression turned more serious. "But that doesn't absolve you of what you've done. That's why I fear you should face justice." He packed away all the files into his briefcase, then looked back at the shinobi, who raised an eyebrow in response. "So, you expect me to go along without resistance?" The blonde raised his hands to show they were free from handcuffs, which fell to the ground with a dull thud. "I'm sorry, All Might, but I won't be going to jail." He stood up, mirroring the hero's posture, and a tense atmosphere enveloped the two blondes, their gazes filled with defiance. Chapter 5. "I understand, and that's why I have a proposition for you," All Might said as he opened his jacket and retrieved a sheet of paper. "I have an academy that's been targeted by various dangerous villains. I'm running out of options and people I can trust. I need you to enroll as a freshman, blending in with other young men your age," he explained, offering the paper to the blonde, who glanced at it briefly. "What if I decline?" he responded defiantly. All Might's reaction was a noticeable increase in muscle mass and a green glow in his eyes. "I'll take you to a place you won't escape from," he declared in a deep voice, causing the Uzumaki to mockingly smile. "Who would have thought the symbol of peace had this side?" he humorously remarked as he took the paper from the hero's hands. "You seem to care a lot about those kids if you're willing to trust someone like me." His smile faded, replaced by a frown. "What makes you think I won't harm your students? What guarantees that I wasn't hired by a villain who wants you dead? Why should you trust I won't betray you or simply vanish in the future?" Each question weighed heavily on the room's atmosphere. "I can't guarantee any of that. I don't know much about you, young Uzumaki," All Might sighed, retrieving his final card to persuade the shinobi. He took a newspaper clipping from his jacket pocket and extended it to the Uzumaki, who took a moment to examine it. "I only know that you're a good person," he said before turning towards the door. Naruto briefly gazed at an image of the girl he had saved, embracing her parents. The little girl was crying tears of joy, tightly hugging her relieved parents who were also weeping tears of happiness. "If this is All Might," paused before exiting the room, turning back to face the serious blonde. "It will be on my terms. I'll provide you with a weekly allowance to cover your day-to-day needs and return your confiscated belongings, nothing more." Smiling, All Might nodded and said, "That's how it will be, young Uzumaki." Izuku was excited. Just a few months ago, he entered UA to pursue his dream of becoming a hero. As the heir of One for All, he bore a great responsibility. Although he couldn't fully control the power yet, he could focus it on his arms and legs for powerful attacks, or to a lesser extent, with his fingers. However, this came at a price, often causing significant physical strain. Only a few days had passed since his intense battle against Kaken, but his wounds had already healed. He had also made several friends in his class, and everything seemed to be going well. Another day, the 14-year-old boy with green hair, wearing the UA school uniform, stood in front of the school's entrance. He had an average height, a slender yet well-built physique, dark green eyes, and freckles on his cheeks. He smiled as he walked forward. "Move over, Deku." He had to step aside as a taller blonde teenager with red eyes briskly walked past him. The blonde wore the same school uniform and had a rather irate expression. Midoriya greeted him with a cheerful "Hi Kaken," but received only a grunt in response before Kaken continued on his way. Sighing, Midoriya made his way to class. Upon entering the school building, he was greeted by two people. "Midoriya-san, it's 11:10 a.m. We have only about 5 minutes until school starts and we shouldn't be late." Midoriya smiled awkwardly at his friend Tenya Iida, who had an exaggeratedly serious demeanor. Iida was a 15-year-old teenager with a tall stature and a strong build, dressed in the typical male school uniform. "Hello, Deku-kun. We've been waiting for you." The other person was a teenager with brown hair and a somewhat round face. She had a good figure with a C-cup chest, a slender waist, and well-defined hips. She wore the female uniform, which resembled the male one, except for the medium short gray skirt and dark flat shoes, paired with high gray stockings. "Hello, guys," greeted their friends as they made their way to their respective classrooms. Upon arrival, they realized they were the last to arrive. The classroom was filled with boys and girls of different appearances, some directly related to their quirks. But something caught the attention of several students. "Hey, guys." A red-haired teenager with sharp teeth greeted the newcomers, drawing their attention. "Looks like we're getting a new classmate," he said cheerfully, pointing to an empty seat in the last row. "Is that allowed?" Kiminari, a blonde teenager with a dark lightning bolt mark in his hair, asked with some doubt, standing next to his red-haired friend, who simply shrugged. "It's unexpected, but not unheard of." Several pairs of eyes turned to a teenager with pale skin and dark hair tied in a high ponytail. She was the most voluptuous among the girls, boasting a slim figure, almost D-cup breasts, a small waist, and ample hips. "Even though we're in the middle of the school year and adding a new student is impractical, it's the academy administration's decision. We shouldn't question their choice," she explained professionally, without a hint of hesitation, while sitting upright behind her desk. And what do you think it looks like? Will it be a girl or a boy?" asked a girl with pink skin as well as her hair and curiously had antennae on her forehead. The excited girl thought about the possibilities of a new partner. "It would be great if it were a girl, there are too few of us here." Her point of view was accepted by her classmates, who saw the lack of balance in the absence of girls. However, others had different thoughts. "Yes, a girl, with big breasts and beautiful. That's all I can ask for," was the cry of a dwarf with strange hair that was shaped like balls. The teenager was only imagining perverted things in front of a new student to harass. This was not well received by the girls who just ignored him. Chapter 6. In the back of the classroom sat Shiori Todoroki, a striking girl with bi-colored hair. She was tall, her long straight hair cascading down to her lower back, starkly divided between white on the right side and red on the left. Her striking features included a burn scar over her left eye and heterochromia, with one eye light blue and the other gray. She boasted a curvaceous figure, making her the second most developed among her peers. Her physique included C-cup breasts, a slender waist, and generous hips, rendering her quite a beauty. The teenager remained silent, unfazed by her classmates' chatter, until the classroom door swung open, announcing the arrival of their teacher. "Quiet down," the students hurriedly took their seats, heeding the slow, tired instructions of their teacher. He was a tall man with a disheveled appearance, black hair falling over his forehead, and a faint beard and mustache. His eyes reflected sheer boredom. Dressed in a black full bodysuit with bandages tied around his neck, he sported yellow goggles hanging from his neck. He maintained a serious expression as he continued, "Today, you'll be joined by a new classmate who will study with you for the next 4 years." All eyes in the room turned towards the door, eager to catch a glimpse of the newcomer. The tall young man who entered had spiky blonde hair and a lean but well-built physique. He wore the male uniform, though it was notably disheveled, missing the tie and shirt placement. Some students couldn't help but notice peculiar marks on his cheeks that resembled cat whiskers. To add to the mystery, white bandages concealed his forehead and right eye. In silence, the teenager strode up to the front of the class, casting an analytical gaze at each of the students. His lone visible eye seemed to pierce through, creating an air of intimidation. Bowing slightly, he introduced himself, "Hello, I'm Uzumaki Naruto," before waiting for the teacher's response. "Anything else you'd like to share? Hobbies? Dreams?" the hero inquired, regarding the motionless teenager. "My hobbies, well, they're not that interesting, and as for dreams, I don't have any in particular," Naruto replied and then made his way to the only vacant seat in the class, leaving the other students with little information beyond his name. "Great, we've got another Bakugo with an ice-cold attitude like Todoroki-san," Denki whispered to Mina, who nodded in agreement. Naruto bore some physical resemblance to Bakugo, the explosive boy in class, but his reserved and aloof demeanor was more reminiscent of the girl with bicolor hair. The rest of the students continued their discussions before the new classmate, who simply took a seat next to Shiori, prompting her curious gaze. "That's enough," Aizawa's word silenced the discussions as he picked up a piece of chalk and began the class. Hours passed, and lunchtime finally arrived. In a different scene, all the students gathered in their respective groups in the academy cafeteria. An isolated table hosted the new student from Class 1A, Naruto, who calmly ate a plate of rice, sipped from a glass of water, and nibbled on an apple. "Do you think he doesn't like us?" At a nearby table, several students from Class 1A discreetly observed their new classmate. Hagakure openly stared at Naruto, but withdrew her gaze when she felt his unexpected focus on her. "Strange, it's like he can see me," she mused thoughtfully to herself, while still keeping an eye on Naruto as he continued to eat. He's just reserved, that's all. Momo dismissed the matter with less concern than her classmates. However, even she raised an eyebrow when she witnessed Todoroki carrying her lunch tray and joining Naruto at the same table. This piqued the curiosity of many students. That's interesting. As Naruto and Todoroki sat at the table together, having their lunch in silence, the teenage shinobi broke the quiet by offering a piece of apple to Todoroki. She looked at him skeptically, but he smiled faintly and extended the apple slice, a simple gesture to break the ice. Shiori Todoroki, and as the sensei said, "You are Uzumaki Naruto," she spoke calmly, taking a bite of the apple. The blonde in front of her simply nodded in acknowledgement. "Your last name doesn't sound familiar to me, and to be accepted in the middle of the year, you must have someone of influence. My question is, who got you into the academy?" Her words impressed Naruto. Shiori wasn't just a pretty face. She displayed intelligence and insight, something he appreciated. "All Might allowed me to enter this academy." Naruto's revelation left Shiori in shock. He stated it so casually, almost sarcastically. She quickly composed herself and nodded. "So, you want to be a hero?" It was an obvious question given their enrollment in an academy meant for training heroes and helping them develop their powers to serve society. The teachers emphasized this repeatedly. "No," came Naruto's straightforward response as he stood up from the table. A few seconds later, the bell rang, signaling the students to return to their respective classrooms. Shiori, however, remained seated for a moment, her curiosity piqued by the enigmatic newcomer, who soon disappeared into the bustling corridors. Chapter 7. Returning to the classroom, they discovered that their teacher was absent. Once everyone had taken their seats, they waited for someone to arrive. They didn't have to wait long as the door swung open wide. Normal entrance. The excitement in the eyes of nearly all the teenagers was evident as the number one hero walked in. "All Might." Mina Ishido's shout was echoed by her classmates, but they fell silent when the older blonde raised his hand. "Very well, young people, this time we'll have an exercise similar to the one we had before. It will involve one-on-one combat of your choice. Let's hope we don't have any casualties like last time." Several students' gazes shifted toward Midoriya, who offered an awkward smile. "It's a good opportunity to see what each of you is capable of in a real fight. I understand it's your first year, but this is necessary." All Might glanced briefly at the door, perhaps hoping he wouldn't regret this impulsive decision, considering the input he had received from his colleagues. FLASHBACK. In UA's director's room, a private meeting was in session among the heads of the institution and the most prominent heroes. The director, a rat-like creature in a formal suit, sipped tea as he sat at his desk. Facing him were All Might, Cementus, Number 13, Midnight, Eraserhead, and Present Mick. All eyes were on the screen displaying an image of their new student. "He doesn't inspire trust," as Awa openly voiced his skepticism about the blonde on the screen. "This decision raises doubts." Toshinori, the school director, paused his tea drinking, his gaze now serious as he crossed his legs and remained still. He watched a video of their new student beheading a giant villain. "We went to great lengths just to cover up everything related to that incident. The police agreed to alter the facts to clear the boy of his crimes. They are waiting for results, but they might be forced to reinstate the charges against him." The rodent's explanation cast a somber shadow over the number one hero. "I understand that my decision seems impulsive, but something tells me I can trust him," the tall blonde said calmly, reaching to turn off the screen displaying Uzumaki, his sword still glistening with blood. His words left his companions in a state of concern. "We're trusting that child solely based on your intuition. I'm sorry, Mr. Toshinori, but we're risking many lives, not just those of the students. What if his intentions are different?" Taking a step forward, the sole woman in the room voiced her doubts. "You have many enemies, and if any of them sent that boy to infiltrate as a sheep among the students, only to reveal himself as a wolf when the time comes to fulfill his true objective, which might be to kill you." Midnight's words hung heavily in the air, and her serious tone had a profound impact on Mount Lady, who was deeply affected by witnessing the boy decapitating the villain she should have stopped. "She's got a point," Cementus chimed in, displaying his uncertainty about the decision being made. "Nevertheless, I have faith in you, All Might. If you believe that this boy can be of assistance when things get tough, so be it." Opinions were divided, but the decision had been made. "Good, but I want to see what the boy is capable of. It wouldn't be wise to pit him against a professional hero. We need to be smarter. Let him act without feeling oppressed. Let's do an exercise." Thoughtfully, the academy director rose and walked to the window. "Where the students of Class 1 will face each other." All Might nodded in agreement with the director's suggestion. "But sir, these procedures are usually carried out at the end of the second year. They aren't prepared for one-on-one fights yet." Present Mick voiced his concern, speaking up for the first time in the entire meeting. "I know, but these days we can no longer afford that luxury." With those words from the suited animal, the meeting came to an end. End of FLASHBACK. All Might patiently waited at one of the training stations. Many of the students were already dressed in their respective hero outfits. However, he raised an eyebrow when he noticed that Uzumaki was only wearing a white sweatshirt, dark pants with bandages tied around his ankles, dark sandals on his feet, and a tanto, a short sword, securely fastened to his back with a brown leather shoulder pad on his left side. Young Uzumaki, didn't we have a suit made to fit your needs? The tall blonde inquired curiously, receiving only a mocking smile from the shinobi, who then cast a glance at the suits his classmates were wearing. If you rely on a suit to manage your abilities, that's a serious problem. You should understand that the suit is just an unnecessary accessory in my view, not to mention, it makes you all look like fools. His words stirred frustration among the teenagers present. However, the shinobi seemed unfazed as he distanced himself from the group to survey the combat area with his eyes. I thought Bakugo was an arrogant idiot, Kiminari muttered to Mina, who nodded in agreement. But they tensed up when the bandaged blonde's gaze locked onto them. Arrogant? The blonde inquired aloud, a faint smile gracing his lips. Shaking his head, he addressed the students, I'm simply confident in my abilities, and I can confidently say I could defeat each and every one of you. His words only fueled the tension. I don't care if you think you're better than these good-for-nothings. But you're not better than me. Kitsuki generated small explosions in his hands as he boldly approached the blue-eyed blonde. Their gazes clashed, and a confrontation seemed imminent. That's enough. All Might positioned himself between the two blondes, averting an impending fight. Young Uzumaki, I must ask you to refrain from making such comments. It's unnecessary, he spoke with a stern tone, but the shinobi responded with a sigh, his expression remaining impassive. Chapter 8. You're right, we must be serious. I'll take on the entire class, he declared. Raising his hands, he began to unwind the bandages on his forehead, revealing a metal headband adorned with a leaf symbol intersected by a horizontal line. If you win, I'll apologize for everything I said, and I'll also leave this academy. Some students showed renewed interest at the challenge, while others remained skeptical. But if I win, he continued as the bandages fell away, unveiling his right eye. A collective gasp filled the room as they laid eyes on a gruesome scar that ran from his forehead to his cheek. It appeared to be a burn mark, with charred and disfigured skin, leaving a severe and unsettling impression. You'll admit that you're not worthy of being called heroes. The shinobi's right eye was a striking blood red, with 3 comma-like marks revolving around the pupil. What in the world is that? Kirishima couldn't help but voice his confusion, feeling a sense of unease when confronted with that peculiar eye, which seemed to scrutinize each and every one of them. His own arms involuntarily tensed up. Toru Hagakure, who had been invisible since she first manifested her quirk at the age of 3, now felt exposed and observed for the first time. Swallowing nervously, she shifted uncomfortably, and her reaction was not unique. Everyone in the room shared a strange and uneasy feeling in the presence of that peculiar eye. As for the number 1 hero, he wore a frown. This was uncharted territory. He knew that individuals born with quirks sometimes exhibited physical alterations, but nothing quite like this. Gazing at that scar and the unique eye, he had the distinct impression that it didn't belong to the Uzumaki. Perhaps his new student had gone so far as to remove his own eye and replace it with someone else's. He needed more information, but he couldn't afford to waste the opportunity of this demonstration. Your challenge is accepted, young Uzumaki, the number 1 hero declared, eliciting surprise from all the students except the shinobi himself. All Might's expression grew more serious. However, should things spiral out of control, I won't hesitate to stop the fight. Do you understand? He asked, his deep voice penetrating as he locked eyes with the shinobi, who simply nodded in response. So, brats, the blonde began, his mismatched eyes glinting with amusement as he surveyed his opponents, all of whom had already activated their own quirks. Ready to taste the real world. A weighty silence blanketed the training area, where a battle was about to unfold. On one side stood Class 1A, while on the other stood their new classmate. All Might maintained a safe distance, observing the impending clash, ready to intervene if necessary. Silence lingered, several students poised for action, yet uncertainty held them back. They were still inexperienced when it came to combat, with some having never faced a real battle before, while others. Oh, Bakugo. Kitsuki, propelled by the explosive bursts from his hands, rocketed forward at full speed toward his opponent, who remained stoically in place, awaiting the attack. With his right hand, the fiery blonde unleashed a devastating blow, resulting in an explosion that forced onlookers to shield themselves as a thick dust cloud enveloped the area. Amid the rising smoke, Kitsuki soared above the rocks he had created with his explosion. Stop hiding, you damn coward. Fuming with rage, he searched for his opponent, who seemed to have vanished. You're quite loud, Kitsuki froze as the shinobi's fist lightly rested against his right cheek. The unexpected move left the explosive teenager stunned, unable to perceive his opponent's swift maneuver. Screaming like a lunatic as you attack, not the smartest move, the shinobi remarked calmly, retracting his fist and crossing his arms. You're a waste of time. With that, he crouched to dodge another explosion, further enraging the explosive teenager. Shut up. Katsuki attempted another attack, priming a massive explosion. However, before he could unleash it, his right arm was seized in a vice-like grip by the blonde. The blonde maintained a serious demeanor. Predictable, without hesitation, he tightened his grip on Katsuki's arm and swiftly threw him to the ground. Then, raising his foot, he stepped on Bakugo's right shoulder, eliciting a piercing scream of pain as the unmistakable sound of bone cracking filled the air. I'm not finished. He hoisted Bakugo back to his feet and, without pause, hurled him toward the speechless spectators, who were left stunned by the brutal display. Katsuki? Are you alright? Kirishima was the first to reach his friend, who responded with a pained grunt as he struggled to rise, only to falter again, his right arm causing him intense pain. Damn, this isn't good. His exclamation was abruptly cut off as the stern, strange-eyed blonde appeared before them with incredible speed. Silence, he declared, mercilessly delivering a kick to Kirishima's face. The Redeed managed to activate his quirk, offering some resistance, but he was still sent sprawling backward, colliding with Kiminari. You're just kids, the shinobi scoffed, pivoting to confront the tail-wielding boy who had leaped from above, intent on attacking. However, this proved no challenge for the shinobi, who effortlessly caught the boy by his left leg and slammed him into Koji Koda, the student gifted with the ability to communicate with animals. The impact sent both of them crashing into the building's wall, rendering them unconscious. Naruto was poised to confront Mineta, who trembled uncontrollably. But blocking his path was Shoji, the masked student with multiple arms, who lunged at Naruto with a barrage of punches. However, with his Sharingan subtly gleaming, Naruto deftly evaded every strike. Stay still. The towering figure roared in frustration, launching even more arms at his nimble opponent. Yet, not a single blow landed. Incredible, Momo muttered in disbelief, mirroring the astonishment of her classmates. The 8-armed giant continued his relentless assault with elusive precision, his goals a blur to the bewildered onlookers. However, everything ground to a halt as Koji suddenly froze. Naruto crouched down and delivered a powerful blow to the center of his stomach, causing the giant to gasp for breath. Chapter 9. A profound silence settled over the area as the towering, masked giant stood still. He took a step back from Naruto, withdrawing his fist from the student's stomach and then crumpled heavily to the ground. All eyes were glued to the scene as the blonde with mismatched eyes appeared ready to strike again. However, Naruto's attack was abruptly halted when powerful sound waves washed over him. His focus shifted to Kyoka, who utilized her quirk to amplify and direct as much noise as possible against him. Don't just stand there. Fight back. She shouted, pouring all her strength into countering the blonde. Her passionate cry snapped her classmates out of their daze, and Shiori was the first to react. With determined steps, she pounded the ground, causing a layer of ice to swiftly encase the right side of her body. Emitting a fierce growl, she summoned a towering ice mountain several meters high, sending it hurtling toward the shinobi, who was engulfed by the icy cascade. Breathing heavily, Shiori sank to her knees. Conjuring such a massive amount of ice had drained her. Yet, it had been necessary to halt this boy, this powerhouse of strength and speed, who seemed like a relentless force. Relief washed over the students as they saw the figure of the shinobi seemingly trapped within the ice mountain. That should do it. I didn't expect it to work, someone muttered. However, their relief was short-lived when they heard his voice once more. Amid the ongoing battles, Naruto's voice echoed from behind them, surprising them all. He stood there, calmly crossing his arms. Ah. Stay back. In a panicked frenzy, Mineta plucked numerous spheres from his head and hurled them at the shinobi. Naruto regarded the projectiles with curiosity, but wisely avoided contact with any of them. He sprinted toward the diminutive student, who was already bleeding from his head. Mineta desperately cried for help as he attempted to flee, but the shinobi seized his cloak and hoisted him up, glaring at him with irritation. Leave it alone. In a slow-motion charge, Iida sprinted towards the shinobi, blue flames erupting from her ankles as she delivered a horizontal kick. To her incredulity, instead of connecting with Uzumaki, she struck Aoyama, sending the French boy crashing hard to the ground, incapacitated by the blow. Slow, Lita's eyes widened in disbelief as she heard the shinobi's voice behind her. He held Mineta, paralyzed, by the head and tossed him into the air. Then, with a swift kick, he propelled the class dwarf toward the speedster, who was caught off guard and received a powerful knee to the face, sending him sprawling backward. Uzumaki unsheathed his sword, swiftly changed his grip to hold it by the blade, and struck Toru with the hilt as she attempted to ambush him from behind. The invisible girl let out a cry as the blow landed on her head, causing her to tumble. She inadvertently collided with Kyoka, who couldn't evade the collision with her friend, and both fell to the ground. Momo manifested a steel barrel from her right arm and wasted no time in launching herself at the blonde. She displayed some basic proficiency in using a bow staff, attempting to strike him with her weapon. However, the shinobi effortlessly caught the object with his hands. Momo swallowed nervously as the black-haired girl tried to retreat, but she found herself unable to move as the shinobi's hand passed over her face, and she was unceremoniously slammed into the ground. Observing the fallen girl, the Uzumaki raised a steel bar, ready to continue his assault. However, a long tongue wrapped around his wrist, and he curiously noticed the frog girl's attempt to ensnare him. With a mocking smile, the shinobi toyed with the girl, lifting her a few meters into the air before letting her crash to the ground alongside her classmates. The shinobi raised an eyebrow as a peculiar shadowy form attacked him from the ground. Leaping, he saw that the shadow was connected to a student with a bird-like head. Swiftly, he evaded the shadow's grasp and charged at Tokoyami, delivering a horizontal kick that struck his opponent. The spectral figure vanished when the bird boy fell unconscious from the blow. "Hey, leave them alone." Rikido Sato pulled a sugar packet from his suit and devoured it. Curiosity piqued, the blonde Uzumaki observed as the teenager's muscles bulked up and he gained considerable speed. With impressive agility, the Uzumaki dodged a swift kick aimed at him by the sugar-charged student. The powerful blow struck the ground, causing it to crack. Remaining impassive, the Uzumaki stepped back to avoid a barrage of rapid punches from Rikido. However, within seconds, the student began to gasp for breath and his speed diminished significantly. Just as he was about to reach for more sugar, the Uzumaki delivered a forceful kick to his left arm, sending him hurtling through the air to crash brutally against a nearby rock. "Take this." Naruto had to hastily tear off his white sweatshirt when corrosive acid rained down upon it. Nearby, a furious Mina repeatedly hurled acid in an attempt to strike the boy who had harmed her friends. However, her relentless assault came to a halt as she was forcefully knocked down by a kick to her back. She gasped for breath, falling to her knees. "Damn coward." The Uzumaki observed with indifference as a substantial amount of tape wrapped around him. He faced Shiro, who had his arms directed at him, and questioned angrily, "You don't even hold back against girls. What kind of men are you?" This earned him only a mocking smile from the blonde as he shook his head. "Do you believe that the adversaries you'll face in the future will be gentlemen who spare you just because you're women? Welcome to the real world, fool," he retorted. With a surge of strength, he snapped his bonds. He then seized one of the ribbons, drawing the student toward him and gripping his neck tightly. "Whether you're a child, a woman, or an old man, it doesn't matter when it comes to fighting for your life and the lives of others." He increased his grip, causing the boy to struggle until he finally released him. Immediately, he kicked Shiro, sending him crashing into the concrete wall. Chapter 10. Sighing, the shinobi observed that only 3 people remained standing. Shiori, Midoriya, and the girl Uraraka. He sheathed his sword on his back and dashed towards the last 3 standing students. Reaching Todoroki, he grabbed her by her suit and flung her into the air. She barely managed to land on her feet before being struck from behind by a blow to her neck, rendering her unconscious. And for the grand finale, smiling with a dangerous glint, the shinobi charged at Ichako, who stood paralyzed. However, when there were only a few meters left to reach her, the green-haired teenager abruptly pushed her aside and scooped her into his arms, carrying her away from the shinobi, who frowned in response. "Shinii." Unbeknownst to the Uzumaki, Bakugo was positioned behind them. He extended his left arm, and the wrist grenade glowed brightly. With his teeth, the blonde hero pulled the safety pin from his suit, triggering a colossal explosion. The blast engulfed the Uzumaki, who could only shield himself. With his right arm hanging uselessly, Kitsuki fell to his knees, breathing heavily. He smiled as he gazed upon the massive crater created by his final attack. However, that smile vanished when he saw the Uzumaki standing at the end of the destructive pit, his arm slightly injured by the unexpected explosion. Smirking faintly, the shinobi withdrew his arms and charged at the exhausted Bakugo, who struggled to stand. He reached for the boy's head and smashed it against the ground, rendering him unconscious. As he left the boy's body, he sighed and stood up, snapping Bakugo's neck. Now, there were only 2 left. Smash. The shinobi had to spin around and deflect a powerful right hook from the green-haired teenager, who had surprisingly appeared behind him to strike. He deflected the boy's glowing orange arm, marked with red symbols, causing him to crash into a nearby brick wall. The result astonished the Uzumaki, as the entire building shook and a 30-square-meter concrete wall vanished, leaving only a trail of destruction. Still surprised, the blonde observed the boy on the ground, noticing that his legs and the arm he had used for the attack were seriously damaged. Setting aside his surprise, he noticed the boy had a type of enhancer that reminded him of inner doors. Interesting, he muttered to himself as he approached the last person standing in the battle. Ichako trembled in fear. All her friends had been defeated and now he was coming for her. Shaking uncontrollably, she clumsily assumed a fighting stance that offered no real defense. As he closed in, she closed her eyes in anticipation. Confused, she felt a weak tap on her forehead. Opening her eyes, she saw the blonde had lightly flicked her forehead with his fingertips. Without another word, he left her and walked towards the exit. Bringing his right hand to his forehead, the blonde lowered the right side of his headband to cover his Sharingan. He let out a sigh as he joined All Might, who hadn't moved since the battle began. Take care of the kids. I'll be back to collect my bet in a few hours. Without a scratch on him, the shinobi left the training area. All Might watched, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead. He had witnessed the entire Class 1 being defeated. He placed a hand to his ear and activated his communicator. It was time to summon the infirmary staff and some doctors. A few hours later, in the auditorium, Class 1 had gathered. They all bore some bruises, with varying degrees of severity. Bakugo's right arm was bandaged, as was Midoriya's. Midoriya had difficulty just standing, indicating that his legs were not yet fully healed. The students were visibly upset and disheartened after the thrashing they'd received at the hands of the new guy, who stood a few steps away with his arms crossed. So, that's all you've got. I'm disappointed, remarked the Uzumaki, his words further fueling the students' anger. It's not fair. You're too strong. Protested the invisible teenager with frustration evident in her voice. And besides, you're crazy to fight like that. Wasn't it supposed to be just practice? She added, her head swathed in bandages. She's right, you're a brute. Someone could have been seriously hurt, chimed in Mina Shido. Like the others, she felt nothing but anger toward the blonde teenager, who remained completely unaffected by their protests. So, it's my fault? The shinobi asked sarcastically, his expression unwavering. You're just a bunch of kids playing hero. You lack discipline and training to wield your powers effectively. Right now, you're nothing more than insects I could crush if I wanted to, he stated, each word further diminishing the students, fueling their anger. Shut up, you damn trash. Fueled by anger, Katsuki impulsively charged at the Uzumaki. But it all came to an abrupt end in the blink of an eye, leaving the students in disbelief. They watched as the explosive boy lay on the ground, held in the grip of the shinobi, who had placed his short sword behind the explosive teenager's head. Leave it alone. When Deku moved to try to help his friend, he was halted by a kunai that landed at his feet. Tension filled the room, and some anxious students turned to All Might, who stood nearby, observing the situation with a serious expression. Bakugo, right? Naruto inquired, still holding a firm grip on the explosive boy, who glared back. You seem to think you're the best of all. You attacked first, without a plan, attempting to blow me to pieces with an explosion that could have also harmed your partner. If it weren't for that boy, Midoriya could have been seriously injured or even killed. Do you have so much anger and rage that it clouds your judgment? He looked up at the other students gathered before him. Do you believe this is just a game? The fight we had revealed something to me. And what's that? Shiori asked in an icy tone, along with her classmates, all feeling intimidated by the intense red eye and the shinobi's demeanor. Chapter 11. That you're not prepared for reality. Do you think the people you'll face in the future will care if they're girls or boys? No, they'll grab you by the neck and rip off your head. That's the best case scenario, he stated in a solemn tone. Pressing the sword against Bakugo's head, tension rippled through the onlookers. The Uzumaki turned his gaze toward Midoriya, causing him to stiffen. Midoriya, pick up the kunai from the ground, he instructed, and the green-haired youth hesitantly obeyed, taking the knife. Now, either kill Uraraka, or I kill Bakugo. A heavy silence settled over the area, but before anyone could react, All Might intervened, forcefully separating the shinobi from Bakugo. The Uzumaki calmly sheathed his sword, looking at the terrified students. He had just presented them with a choice. To kill a friend or an innocent girl. You're a monster, Achako whispered, her words audible to everyone. She stepped back, avoiding the gaze of the blonde, who casually adjusted his bandages around his forehead and right eye. I'm a survivor. If you're determined to pursue this hero path, know that you'll face such decisions frequently. If you lack the courage to make the right choice, someone else will decide for you, and you won't like the outcome, he warned. Without further ado, the shinobi left at a leisurely pace, leaving the bewildered students in his wake. Class is over for today. You may go, declared All Might, and the teenagers departed, heaving sighs of relief. All Might rubbed his forehead wearily. There were cameras throughout the room and the training area where the fight had taken place. The boy's abilities were astonishing, but his ideals. They weren't what such a young boy should have. As hours passed in the lower areas of the city, in the apartments where the shinobi resided, he sat on his bed wearing only the lower part of his clothing. The teenager had removed his bandages, contemplating them for a moment. Are you going to cry, or are you just thinking about the thrashing you gave those kids? Kitsune's comment earned a sigh from the shinobi, and he flopped back onto the bed. They're just children, it's better for them to enjoy this stage. All I did was give them a small taste of what awaits them, the shinobi spoke aloud, unconcerned about speaking to himself when he was alone. You're sentimental, I'm going to sleep, Kitsune declared before cutting the mental connection, leaving the blonde alone as he sat on his bed. The Uzumaki gazed into the distance, his sword in hand, contemplating it. How much time had passed since he arrived? Closing his eyes, he let the sword fall onto the bed beside him and decided to rest. He had just broken one of his most important rules, and now he was paying the price. At the borders of the land of water, near the village of Rain, the dark sky was momentarily illuminated by lightning from an ominous storm that only deepened the darkness. Amidst the gloomy landscape, numerous fallen trees and large craters scarred the terrain. In proximity to this scene lay a badly injured teenager with blonde hair. His left arm hung limply from serious fractures, dressed only in dark pants that exposed his torso, marred by dark bruises. One of his eyes remained closed, leaving the other to shine brightly with his Sharingan. The teenager breathed heavily, his right hand retrieving a parchment from his backpack. Struggling with the rain-soaked parchment, he let it fall, allowing the heavy rain to drench it. With exhaustion evident, he used his blood-stained fingers to write upon it. After a few moments, he closed the parchment. With his only available arm, he formed hand seals, causing a crow to appear amidst an explosion of smoke. Take it now. Following the command, the crow grasped the scroll with its talons and took flight. Gazing at the sky, the blonde observed his summoning disappear into the rain. Weakened, he leaned against a nearby tree, closing his eyes. Tired? The teenager reacted instantly, leaping away to avoid an unseen force that obliterated the tree and left a crater. In the distance, he spotted a dark silhouette draped in a cloak adorned with red clouds emerging from the trees. The assailant was an adult man with orange hair and facial piercings, small dark steel cylinders. His silver eyes bore a ringed pattern around the pupils. If there is a god, it wouldn't be you, Pain. Wearily, the blonde sank to his knees, gazing at his attacker who displayed nothing but indifference. So, are you going to kill me now, huh? After all these years of friendship and service, what a lousy friend. The shinobi's mocking words only prompted the Renegan user to raise his right hand and pointed at him. In response, the teenager gulped and adopted a defensive stance. I've always been impressed by your sense of humor. It's been a pleasure, Uzumaki Naruto. With a glint in his eyes, he conjured an invisible force from thin air, obliterating more than 400 meters of forest beside the blonde shinobi, who was flung away by the gravitational slingshot. As he soared through the air, the teenager controlled his movements, eventually landing safely. Lowering his hand, the orange-haired man turned and sauntered at a leisurely pace back towards the village hidden in the rain. Chapter 12. In the distance, amidst the fallen trees, Naruto lay motionless beneath the weight of the trunks that crushed him. A feminine voice broke the silence, prompting the Uzumaki to open his eyes and gaze at the female silhouette of the nine-tailed Biju, perched on a tree trunk above. How weak, the nine-tailed fox remarked while seated on the tree trunk. Although you did well, who am I kidding, they did nothing to you. Come on, get up. I don't plan on having to reform in 120 years because of your death. With those words, the Redeed raised a finger on her right hand and touched Naruto's chest, enveloping him in a bubbling layer of contaminated red chakra that swiftly healed his wounds. Ugh, Naruto growled as he lifted the log that had pinned him down. Now free, he struggled to stand and took a few limping steps, all while being observed by the smiling Redeed. She relished seeing her jailer in such a deplorable state. Although she had healed his injuries, they had only been lifted to prevent him from dying. The fractures and other damage continued to torment him with every step. I was expecting at least a thank you, but seeing you in this state is enough, the Redeed with red eyes commented as she watched her Jinchuriki continue to walk in a random direction. I don't understand. Why do you get up? You have nothing. You don't have a home. You have no friends. Your family turned their back on you, and your own people are looking for your head. You are alone. With each word, Naruto's gaze grew somber. Walking resolutely, he soon found himself outside the limits of the hidden rain village. Upon reaching a green meadow, he noticed that the rain was gradually subsiding. Sighing, he continued walking, only to suddenly fall into a sinkhole that opened beneath his feet. As he tumbled downward, Naruto glimpsed that he had landed in a cave beneath the earth. Gazing up, he saw the hole through which he had fallen. Frowning, he got to his feet and noticed something peculiar ahead of him. There were two pillars of rock, standing vertically and in parallel, adorned with strange engravings in an unfamiliar dialect. The ethereal form of the Kyuubi appeared beside its Jinchuriki, instantly recognizing the engravings on the rock. Approaching and running its ethereal hands along the rock pillar, the fox noted, Jiji. Frowning, it observed the distinctive symbol of the Renegan carved into the rock. You should leave here. This is not something that humans should see. Naruto's jailer merely looked at the massive pillars. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the Redeed's words, then touched the pillar. To his surprise, grooves began to form and the two pillars rapidly transformed into a bright door that illuminated the entire cave. Before he could react, the radiant portal pulled him towards it. Opening his eyes, Naruto found himself in his apartment, lying in bed. With a grunt, he rubbed his forehead in frustration, then rose to his feet. He glanced at the bedroom window, which revealed the gradual emergence of the sun on the horizon, signaling the start of a new day. Sighing, Naruto prepared himself for another day at UA. Weeks had passed, and the rumor of a single boy defeating Class 1 had quickly spread throughout UA. This naturally became a source of amusement for students from other departments and courses. They found it intriguing that the so-called best candidates of their generation had been bested by a solitary individual. One might assume that such a feat would earn Naruto respect and recognition at UA. However, his stern and intimidating demeanor led to him being dubbed the problem boy in the academy. He was seen as someone who lacked a future as a hero, and some even labeled him as a potential future villain to be faced. As a result of these events and rumors, a deep-seated enmity developed between Class 1 and Naruto. Some students chose to ignore it and focused on their studies or socializing with their classmates, leaving the shinobi to his own devices. Yet, there were others who were determined to bridge the gap. Deku stood with his lunch tray in hand, surveying the vast dining hall where all the students gathered. The green-haired boy had fully recovered from his injuries thanks to the help of the infirmary's elderly woman and her healing quirk. Despite his injuries, he hesitated as he gazed into the distance at Naruto, who sat alone at an isolated table in the center of the cafeteria. Midoriya contemplated joining the new student and striking up a conversation. However, his shoulder was touched by a solemn Iida, with Uraraka standing close behind. Iida shook his head and Uraraka chimed in, "I don't think it's a good idea, Deku-kun. You don't seem like the type who enjoys solitary company." Her words gave Izuku pause, and in the end, he relented, choosing to sit with his friends, along with the majority of his class. "I'm surprised he still comes here," Kiminari remarked, seated at the same table as the others, eating his lunch. His comment was acknowledged by his fellow classmates, who merely gave Naruto a fleeting glance. "My arms are still sore from the beating he delivered," Kirishima added, rubbing his right arm with a pained expression. The scars from their encounter with the new student had dealt a heavy blow to their pride. "Why do you think that's the case?" inquired Toru, her gaze fixed directly on the shinobi, seemingly unfazed by the others avoiding eye contact with him. "Because he's crazy and a psychopath." Mineta blurted out his fear of the shinobi, who had kicked him in the back, causing lingering pain for days. "Isn't this supposed to be an academy for heroes?" he grumbled, crossing his arms in annoyance. "He has as much right as anyone to be here," Momo chimed in, casting an annoyed look at the perverted dwarf. "UA was founded on the belief that anyone can be a hero." She frowned and took a deep breath. "We don't know about Uzumaki-sen's personal life, but he must have his reasons for his behavior. Maybe he had a difficult life, we don't know, but that's going to change." Surprising several at the table, Momo stood up, determination gleaming in her eyes. She picked up her lunch tray. "As class president, I must set an example and not leave a classmate in isolation." Before anyone could intervene, she headed toward the table where the shinobi was seated. "Wait." Kyoka attempted to halt her, but Momo had already departed. Sighing, Kyoka slumped back into her seat. "She's taking that position too seriously. Why did we have a re-election?" she muttered in frustration, while her friends exchanged knowing glances. Why did Iida feel ashamed about the beating they received and resign, saying he wasn't ready for the position? Achako spoke candidly, unaware of the awkward tension her comment would bring, causing Iida to look at her in surprise. He resumed eating in silence. Chapter 13. "I remember that time in the Great Shinobi War when I was attacked by the Kagaya clan. I used their bones as toothpicks and let only a few escape so that they could spread the warning that the Nine-Tails Kitsune should not be disturbed." The Uzumaki sat at the table, eating his lunch, while the Nine-Tails Reed companion sat with her back to him, casually eating some fish and rice. "What a touching story," the blonde teenager thought sarcastically, not bothering to look at the Nine-Tails, who seemed rather bored. "You know, despite this place being annoying, it's nice to feel the emotions of fear, jealousy, and anger from these brats," the Biju commented, her eyes scanning the students around them. "All of them fear or hate you. It doesn't surprise me. Humans are despicable beings who fear those they perceive as superior. I'm not superior to anyone. I'm just like any of them," the Uzumaki quickly corrected himself, pausing before adding, "As you say, I'm just another ordinary human, like any of them." The blonde's words prompted a snort of annoyance from the Nine-Tails. "You're quite peculiar. Why do you stay here? It's obvious that no one wants you in this place. You're isolating yourself from the great opportunities that await you. Let's leave this dump and find some fun elsewhere. No one here cares about you." The Redeed's words were laced with acid as she gazed intensely at the shinobi, their red and blue eyes meeting. "You're more talkative than usual." You're right, no one wants me here, but that doesn't mean I care, the Uzumaki replied mentally as the silhouette of the retreat disappeared. Sighing, he prepared to continue with his lunch, but was interrupted by someone standing in front of his table. Curious, he looked up to see Aoi Rozu approaching. Good morning, Uzumaki-san. I hope you don't mind if I sit with you, the Uzumaki noticed that the girl came from a higher social background, evident in her manner of speech, her straight posture, and her somewhat forced smile. It's a free country, Momo-san, was the simple response from the shinobi as he reached for the apple left on his tray. Upon his acceptance, the dark-haired teenager took a seat. Thank you, the girl responded with a forced smile, showing her gratitude for the dry words of the blonde. An uncomfortable silence hung between them. With an analytical gaze, the teenager noticed that her classmate had bandages on his wrists and part of his hands. She wondered to herself, could it be suicide attempts? She briefly examined the shinobi's hands, but her scrutiny didn't go unnoticed. Curious? The Uzumaki inquired, a smile tugging at his lips, causing the girl to avert her gaze. He then raised his right arm, removing the bandages to reveal his injured arm, displaying some bruises and cuts. The sight left the teenager gasping in surprise and disbelief. Street fights? She asked cautiously, considering that he wouldn't be the first to engage in illegal fights using his quirk. She observed carefully as the blonde calmly rewrapped his arm with the bandages. No, I'm just undergoing rigorous training, he responded plainly, dismissing the theories or accusations from the black-haired girl. She appeared relieved. Well, that's a relief, because I would be compelled to report it to the authorities if that were the case. Fighting with our quirks outside of designated facilities goes against the academy's rules, and it could even lead to expulsion, Momo explained earnestly, waiting for the blonde's reaction, who responded with a mocking smile. Expel me? Everyone here would like that, he remarked, casting a glance around, causing those who had been observing them to quickly avert their gaze. They're not very good at speaking in a low voice, he added, pointing towards another table where students from Class 1 sat. They tensed up upon realizing that they had been overheard. Well, I'm sorry if we were talking about you behind your back, but please understand that we don't wish for you to be expelled or anything, the girl replied, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. You don't need to lie, I know I'm not the nicest guy around. To be honest, my younger sister is the cheerful one who always makes friends with her silly and innocent demeanor. I wish I could be more like her, he sighed, rising from his seat. Even if you're afraid of me or even angry at me, I can only tell you that I consider you all my comrades, part of this group. I know that you're all good people, which is why I promise I'll give my life to protect you. With those words, he left the table. Momo, along with the rest of Class 1A, appeared puzzled by his final statement. Despite how they had ignored and treated him, he regarded them as his comrades, part of a group. Before anyone could say anything else, the loud bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. With various thoughts on their minds, the students of Class 1 headed to the locker room. In just a few minutes, they would depart for a trip to the rescue center. Chapter 14. Izawa noticed that all his students were strangely slouched in their seats on the bus, which had only left a few minutes ago. Few were speaking, and it appeared to be related to several of them sneaking glances at the shinobi seated behind them, accompanied by a silent Toru. Izuku, who was just a few seats in front of the blonde with a sword, sat next to Asui and Kirishima. The green-haired boy observed curiously as the Uzumaki sat with his eyes closed, appearing to be asleep. Uzumaki-san, however, he opened his eyes upon hearing Uraraka's voice. Looking at the brunette, he noticed that she was kneeling in her seat, looking directly at him. Can I ask you a question? She inquired. Nodding his head, he leaned back in his seat to better address the girl, drawing the attention of several other students. You said you would give your life for us, why? Uraraka asked curiously. She was perplexed because on her first day, this guy had made fun of them, beaten them all, belittled their dreams, and even threatened to kill one of her classmates if they didn't kill her. These constant changes left her feeling very confused. It's part of my code, he replied calmly, gazing absent-mindedly out of the bus window. Code? An intrigued Shiori, who was sitting in front of Midoriya, chimed in. When the girl with mixed hair asked about the code, the blonde simply took a deep breath and looked at his classmates. My sensei told me that the most important thing a person can have are their own codes. Our codes are what define us as people, not stealing, not lying, not harming a loved one, perhaps some of the codes that you yourselves have to become better people. Each person has their own codes, and that's what makes us different from each other. Our own judgment tells us who we will be at the end of the day, or in simple terms, a hero or a villain, the blonde explained in a relaxed manner. He then fell silent, allowing the students to contemplate his words. Shouda, on the other hand, looked suspiciously at the boy. What he expressed were his ideals, and he could respect that. However, having personal rules could lead to ignoring society's rules, and this was one of the main reasons behind the existence of villains. They had their own goals and rules, often ignoring and breaking those set by society. Taking a deep breath, the professor watched as the vehicle parked. They had arrived. Stepping off the bus, he was followed by the teenagers who looked in amazement at the large building in front of them. As they entered through the massive gates, they saw a dome divided into different disaster zones. "Welcome," a guy in an astronaut-like suit appeared in front of the group. Naruto lost interest when Midoriya started talking unnecessarily about the hero in charge of the rescue wing. Curiously, he looked around and found it strange that the government was willing to spend so much money on building these places. It seemed like a waste of resources. Nothing guaranteed that some of his classmates would become true heroes just by attending a selective academy, but it wasn't necessary to dwell on these details. "Is everything okay?" Naruto turned around to see a worried Momo, who was just a few steps away from him. "Yes, but apparently, these suits you're wearing are helpful to you," he said, giving an analytical look to the dark-haired girl next to him, who felt uneasy under his scrutiny. "I've noticed that your quirk involves creating objects from your body fat, which is an incredibly challenging skill, in my opinion." "Hey?" The teenager seemed confused by the sudden change of topic. At first, she thought he was merely staring at her due to her revealing outfit, but it appeared he was unfazed by that. "Don't misunderstand me. Your quirk is interesting. It not only allows you to create objects, but also offers a wide range of options. I've learned that you're the top academic performer in the class, so your intellect deserves respect. I wouldn't be surprised if with your intelligence and ability, you become someone great in the future." With that, he continued on his way, leaving the girl still processing his unexpected words. Thank you," she replied sincerely as she hurried to catch up with him. It felt good to be recognized for her skills and intellect. Normally, the boys she knew focused on her appearance or upper-class status. As she was about to speak again, she noticed that she, along with the other students and teachers, had come to a stop as a strange purple mist began to form in the middle of the dome. Chapter 15. From the mist, a portal formed and a hand emerged, followed by the head of a man with white hair, his face obscured by one hand, while the other covered different parts of his body. He was clad in a dark attire with a Mayan motif. The blonde observed him closely. "Everyone, gather in one place and don't move," the class teacher suddenly ordered, which left the students looking at him with annoyance. "Number 13. Protect the students," the black-haired man shouted, stepping forward. "What is that? Is this like the entrance exam?" Kirishima inquired. "Don't move." The black-haired man stood atop a railing. "Villains." Midoriya's cry confirmed what was becoming increasingly evident. As the purple shadow expanded, dozens of individuals emerged from the portal, men and women with various physical characteristics, all eager to begin what they saw as a massacre. "Eraserhead and number 13, a voice emanated from the rift, akin to a cloud from which the villains spilled forth. "According to the information we received, Mr. All Might is supposed to be here." However, the spectral entity with nothing but red eyes continued. "Where is he? After all the effort we've gone through and bringing so many of us here, you can't tell me that All Might, the symbol of peace, isn't here." The speaker, a teenage girl on the brink of adulthood, seemed to be the leader. She wore a dark leotard adorned with numerous hands on various parts of her body, one hand particularly obscuring her face. "I wonder if he'll appear if we kill all these kids," the leader declared, sending shivers down everyone's spine, except for Naruto, who remained calm with crossed arms, observing the situation. Taking a step forward, Aizawa unwound the bandages from his neck and with a determined gleam in his red eyes, he addressed his students, "You stay with number 13 and don't move." Without further ado, he leaped into action, ignoring the concerned cries of the students who watched him act. He landed near the group of villains, who wasted no time charging at him. "Stupid. You plan to attack all of us alone," shouted a person with triggers at the tips of his fingers. However, he was stunned when his quirk failed, as did several others. Before he could comprehend what happened, a kick to his face knocked him out cold. "We have to help him," Izuku exclaimed, making a move as if to jump over the railing. However, he was promptly restrained by someone grabbing his suit and pulling him aside. Confused, he watched as a serious Naruto approached the railing. "You heard the teacher, stay put." "I'm going to." Naruto was about to finish his sentence when he swiftly drew his sword and flung it ahead of him. Several students were startled as the sword passed dangerously close to them and ended up right where the strange purple mist was forming. "Nice reflexes, kid." Kurogiri remained unfazed as the sword passed through his head. However, he was taken aback when the boy appeared behind him, sword in hand. "He's fast." Kurogiri's body was marked by multiple cuts, which reached his metal cylinder. "I don't recall anyone with his abilities on our list of students. He must have been added recently. He's a threat." With these thoughts, the villain saw the shinobi creating some distance and studying him. Before he could react further, Kirishima and Bakugo launched an attack. The useless Uzumaki isn't the only one who can attack. Bakugo extended his arm to release an explosion, while the Redeed activated his quirk in his arms. However, before they could reach the misty figure, they were absorbed by a portal along with others that opened. Several students were taken away, and number 13 suffered damage while trying to absorb one of the portals. Oh no. Ichako watched as Deku and Asui disappeared through a portal. Stepping back, she noticed a portal opening in front of her. However, just before she could be taken, a thin steel thread wrapped around her waist and whisked her away from the portals. Surprised, she found herself alongside Momo, Toru, Kiminari, Ashido, Kyoka and Iida, all rescued by Naruto, who held wires in his hands and mouth. "You saved us." Ichako exclaimed happily as she got up along with her classmates. "Iida, you need to find help. The rest of you, take care of number 13 and get out of here," commanded Naruto, his voice cutting through the students still standing on the entrance platform. He glanced back at the villain made of mist with annoyance. The mist villain vanished through another portal. Turning to his classmates, Naruto urged, "What did I tell you? Get out." Iida was the first to snap out of his paralysis and bolted toward the door at full speed, only to have it slam shut. "One got away," mumbled a stoic Shigaraki, his frown visible behind the hand covering his face. He turned to his left and nodded at a guy with a screen on his arm, indicating that he had successfully hacked into the building's systems and blocked any distress signals. They would only call for help after everyone was dead, blaming the heroes for their failure. Shigaraki then shifted his attention back to Izawa, who was still battling the remaining villains. Ah. Another one of the villains fell to Eraserhead's swift right hand. Izawa was visibly exhausted from the continuous use of his quirk. He took a deep breath, preparing to continue, but was suddenly interrupted by a surprise blow from a towering figure, over 2 meters tall, with bulging muscles, wielding a massive hammer and intent on crushing the hero. However, he never got the chance as a sword blade pierced his right shoulder. Before he could scream in pain, his neck was seized and he was forcefully slammed into the ground, impaled by the sheer strength of his assailant. Naruto stood over the downed man, withdrawing his sword with a swift motion. He then turned, earning incredulous looks from the villains and a serious nod of acknowledgement from Izawa, who was slowly rising to his feet. "Dear lovely readers, I have made a Patreon account and there I have already uploaded 15 advanced chapters and you can read there till chapter 40. Also the first tier has a 7 days free trial, so you can give it a try and then purchase a membership to support me." Chapter 16. At the hero's gaze, the shinobi snorted. "I didn't kill him, just made sure he won't get up for a while," he reluctantly explained while scanning the surroundings. There were still several people remaining and he was running out of patience. He didn't want to reveal too much in front of so many witnesses. Slowly, he reached for his sword on his back, ready to take action. He narrowed his eyes as it unfolded. Eraserhead had fought alongside All Might before, encountering few individuals who were so fast that the human eye couldn't even track their movements. Now, he witnessed someone who could be compared to the number 1 hero. In a matter of seconds, more than 45 invaders lay on the ground, incapacitated by non-lethal sword cuts and blows. Naruto, amidst the fallen villains, moved his sword only to let their blood drip onto the ground. Turning around, he faced the last 3 villains. The Mist Man, the hulking muscle-bound figure with an exposed brain, and the man with hands obscuring his face. Is this the best you could muster? How underwhelming. He sheathed his sword, contemplating whether to rescue his classmates who had been taken to various parts of the facility. "Wow, it's incredible," Mina, a pink-skinned teenager, exclaimed from the top of the entrance platform, her gaze filled with admiration and fear as she witnessed the swift takedown of so many foes in mere seconds. "He's in a league of his own far beyond any of us," Kiminari admitted aloud, his fear evident as he observed this astonishing display of speed. How could a human move with such incredible swiftness? His thoughts resonated with the others who kept their distance, prioritizing their safety. Does his quirk resemble Midoriya-san's? Can he enhance his body and senses simultaneously? Momo pondered uneasily, her eyes glued to the unfolding scene. As she turned her attention back to Shigaraki, she noticed him scratching his neck in annoyance, witnessing his pawns being defeated in such a humiliating manner. He glared at the smirking blonde. How arrogant. Nomu, the giant creature at his side, tensed instantly upon hearing the teenager's voice. The young man raised his hand to point at the shinobi, who still stood there with his arms crossed. "Kill him." With that simple command, the towering figure, a 3-meter-tall man, growled and dropped to all fours, fixing his gaze on his intended target and preparing to strike. Observing the Nomu's very muscular body and short legs, Naruto assumed it wouldn't be a problem to handle. He began to reach for his sword, but in just a few moments, a massive fist slammed into his face. The ground beneath him cracked as the Nomu charged at full speed, its right fist impacting his face with incredible force. The shinobi was sent flying several meters, crashing into a concrete wall. Dazed and in pain, Naruto thought in shock as he felt his back almost breaking from the impact against the hard wall. He tried to regain his composure, but he didn't even see the black blur coming at him. He was smashed again against the concrete wall, burying him further under the rubble that cascaded down. Everyone watched in astonishment as the creature sent the Uzumaki crashing into a concrete wall, causing a significant section of it, around 50 square meters, to crumble dangerously. Tamura watched with satisfaction as the Nomu emerged from the wall and dropped the rubble onto the arrogant blonde, who was now buried beneath tons of concrete. A deathly silence settled over the area, with only the heavy footsteps of the enormous creature audible. Kurogiri joined his leader's side, and Tamura raised his hand, pointing at the dark-haired hero, Eraserhead, who felt helpless as he witnessed one of his students facing a possible death. The same creature that had defeated Naruto now approached him. Eraserhead raised his arms in a futile attempt to defend himself, only to be mercilessly attacked. Naruto. Momo was the first to snap out of her shock. Her classmate had just been buried under tons of rubble. Her mind raced as she turned to a terrified Uraraka beside her. Thinking quickly, she grabbed her hand and pulled her along. "Listen, we have to get Naruto sent out from under the rubble. I know you're terrified, but only you could make those tons of concrete float." Without hesitation, they sprinted down the left side of the platform, ignoring the concerned screams of their teammates who remained near number 13. Yes. Let's help him." Achako snapped out of her shock, realizing they needed to save their classmate. Following the lead of the black-haired teenager, they had to pass by their sensei, who was being brutally beaten by that monstrous villain. They felt helpless but continued running towards their goal, passing by an artificial pond. There, they encountered Izuku, Mineta and Asui, who were headed in the opposite direction. "Where are you going?" "The exit is over there." Mineta, with his characteristic bowl-shaped hair, shouted in panic, expressing his desire to go home. "We need to go get Naruto. He's right here." The class president shouted, pointing in the direction where the loud crash had just occurred. Both Deku and the frog girl saw this and understood that the deafening roar they had heard moments ago was the impact that had felled their classmate. "Uzumaki-san. Did he get defeated?" The green-haired teenager asked in astonishment, noticing that their sensei was now under the control of the Nomu, his arms broken. Angrily, Deku averted his gaze. He considered rushing to Naruto's aid, but Aizawa's stern look reminded them to escape. They couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. "We need to fight for him and get help." The students exchanged determined nods and continued on their way to rescue their fallen comrade. However, their path was abruptly blocked by a portal that opened before them. A hand emerged from the portal and lunged for Deku's face. The teenager watched in shock as Shigaraki emerged from the portal, along with his misty companion, who had reformed. Luckily, Deku's elongated tongue coiled around his waist and pulled him out of harm's way. The group of heroes now found themselves confronted by Kurogiri and Tamura. "Planning to go somewhere?" The dark-haired teenager asked mockingly, a sly smile on his face as he observed the students heading in a certain direction. He gestured with his hands, and in an instant, the Nomu arrived, dragging Aizawa's lifeless body. The teacher was roughly deposited at the feet of the students, who felt fear coursing through their bodies. Eraserhead wore a lost expression, a clear sign that he was no longer able to continue fighting. Given his injuries, it wouldn't be long before his condition became fatal. Assessing the dire situation, Deku stepped forward to shield the girls and his fallen sensei. "Girls, get sensei out of here." His legs trembling and his eyes filled with determination, the teenager assumed a defensive stance. "I'll buy you time to escape, it's the only thing I can do until All Might arrives." His entire body was enveloped in green light and his skin took on an orange hue with red lines. He was about to unleash his maximum strength. By leaping and striking with his legs, he could inflict enough damage and create an opportunity for his friends to flee. Although he knew he would be rendered immobile and vulnerable, it was the only course of action available to him now. Naturally, his friends vehemently opposed such a self-sacrificing act, except for Mineta, who had fled to the exit long ago. "The true hero," Shigaraki muttered in annoyance, casting a disdainful glance at the green-haired teenager. "I'll relish seeing All Might's face of fury when he arrives to find nothing but a pile of bodies that were once his students. Kill them all, Nomu." Time seemed to stand still as the monstrous creature charged toward the group of students. Izuku was prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice to protect his friends and join the impending battle. However, the Nomu never reached the teenagers. It was sent flying backward by a powerful blow to its chin, crashing heavily behind its leader. Naruto landed between the villains and the young heroes, bearing visible wounds and a blood-stained torn sweatshirt. His body displayed various injuries, with a notable gash on his head that caused blood to trickle down his forehead. With a resolute expression, the shinobi revealed that he had removed his bandages, exposing his bandana and his menacing Sharingan, with its swirling tomos. I won't allow my comrades to be killed. Naruto extended his right hand from behind his back, unsheathing his sword and pointing it menacingly at the surprised villains. They hadn't anticipated the Uzumaki's recovery after that potentially fatal blow. With his sword poised, the shinobi stared down his adversaries. They'll have to walk over my lifeless body before they reach them. The time for games had ended. He had played enough villains and heroes, it was time to do things his way. Chapter 17. The atmosphere at the rescue station was thick with tension. Most of the villains had been defeated by the students who had gathered at the building's entrance. However, there was a conspicuous absence among them. Yaoyorozu, Asui, Midoriya, Uraraka, and, most notably, Naruto. Their whereabouts remained a mystery until a thunderous roar shook the air, drawing the attention of everyone present. Oru and the others turned their gaze toward the source of the commotion, their eyes widening in disbelief. The fearsome creature that had recently bested their sensei and one of their most formidable classmates now stood alongside the villains, facing the rest of the Uzumaki's companions. Returning to the scene with the villains, it became evident that they were taken aback and perturbed by the unexpected arrival of the blonde warrior. His bandages had fallen, revealing an eye that had been concealed, much to the intrigue of Kurogiri. "You just can't accept defeat, can you?" Kurogiri mocked, eyeing the slow regeneration of Naruto's injuries, a peculiar quirk that didn't escape his notice. "And what makes you think you can win now?" Shigaraki chimed in impatiently, tapping his hand against his face. The strange eye of the audacious blonde had an uncanny effect on him. In response to their taunts, Naruto's grip on his sword tightened, his resolve unshaken. "Why do I think I can win now?" he retorted solemnly, his body poised for action. "Do you think you can attack my comrades with the intent to kill? I'm not like the other heroes you've encountered. I'm not aiming to win, I'm aiming to kill you." His words hung heavily in the air, conveying a deadly seriousness that sent shivers down their spines. Momo, standing behind Naruto with the rest of the group, couldn't contain her concern and spoke up, urging reason and caution. But the determined gaze of the shinobi silenced her, making it clear that he was resolute in his intent. "You're right. You should escape and seek help," Naruto calmly agreed, unwrapping the bandages from his left wrist to reveal an intricate pattern. Momo began to protest, but the intensity of Naruto's gaze left her no choice but to back down. Asui, Deku, and Uraraka joined her, ready to flee with their injured sensei, while keeping a close eye on the unfolding confrontation. But the dark-haired teenager attempted to respond, only to find herself silenced by the unwavering gaze of the shinobi. Her voice faltered, and she took a few hesitant steps back. Eventually, her hand was gently taken by a nervous Asui. Together with Deku and Uraraka, who were ready to assist the green-haired man in carrying their injured sensei, the teenagers retreated towards the safety of their other classmates. Shigaraki, annoyed by their escape, questioned their intentions. He contemplated ordering the fearsome Nomu to eliminate the group of students. However, before he could issue any commands, shurikens suddenly darted towards them, prompting Kurogiri to swiftly create a portal that transported them to a rocky area within the disaster site. "Now we can go after the children," Kurogiri began to say, but his words were cut off by a series of fiery explosions. The Nomu instinctively shielded its leader from the brunt of the blasts, which originated from peculiar papers adorned with strange writings. The explosion subsided, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. On the ground, the mist-like entity stared in anger at the heavily damaged metal cylinder that held its form together. Starting with the hindrance, the purple-clad villain's eyes widened in disbelief as he heard a voice from behind. Before he could react, Naruto's sword pierced his cylinder, causing it to release sparks and suffer significant damage. "I don't know what these are for, but they must be important." Naruto withdrew his sword from the peculiar object, then kicked it away. It appeared to be incapacitated, with the mist dispersing and only a small remnant clinging to the metal cylinder. The Nomu let out a fierce roar and charged at Naruto with tremendous speed. The blonde shinobi skillfully evaded its onslaught, moving at an extraordinary pace that surpassed human capabilities. As the Nomu swung its mighty fists, Naruto adeptly dodged each blow with his Sharingan gleaming brightly, his grip on his sword unwavering. In a burst of elusive speed, a swift move aimed at his head from the left side. Passing beneath the Nomu, he made a cut on the creature's right side. With a scream of agony, the Nomu witnessed blood flowing from the deep gash. The attack didn't stop there. The Uzumaki had his sword enveloped in a bluish electric glow, accompanied by small sparks surrounding the blade as he descended rapidly. Executing a horizontal slash, the blonde managed to sever the left hand of his adversary, who attempted to shield himself from the blow. Observing the severed hand fall, Naruto prepared for another strike. However, he had to raise his arms as a shield when the Nomu counterattacked with a powerful blow from its right arm. The impact sent him skidding backward, and to halt his slide, the shinobi drove his sword into the ground. Chapter 18. Kneeling on the ground, he carefully observed how his enemy's wound had closed while the lost hand was regenerating rapidly. In just a few seconds, the strange being had completely recovered from all the attacks. Almost instantaneous regeneration, he mumbled to himself. He possesses greater speed and strength than I do. This won't be easy. Sheathing his sword, he formed hand seals and watched as his opponent approached once more. Let's see how much you can endure. Clenching his hands together, he created a bright glow. To the astonishment of all the spectators, beams of energy erupted from Naruto's hands, striking the Nomu. The creature was paralyzed by the intense electric discharge coursing through its body. Trembling under the onslaught, it staggered back. Seizing the opportunity, the shinobi charged forward and delivered a powerful blow to the Nomu's stomach, followed by a kick that sent it soaring into the air. The Nomu was abruptly slammed back to the ground by a downward kick from Naruto, who had positioned himself in front of the creature. Now. Drawing his sword once more, Naruto delivered a deep cut to the Nomu's stomach. He then proceeded to make several precise cuts across different areas of the Nomu's body. Despite being stunned by the electric shock and previous strikes, the creature still managed to skid across the ground. The blonde shinobi positioned himself behind the Nomu and sliced through the tendons behind its knees, causing the creature to collapse to the ground on its knees. The blood was staining the floor and his clothes, but that didn't matter now. Taking his sword tightly, he looked for the vital point, the brain exposed on the top of the head. Jumping up, he was going to deliver the final blow. Meanwhile, with the students, we see how they were stupefied by such a demonstration of brutality. Some felt the impulse to vomit when they saw the large amount of blood staining the ground and bathing the Uzumaki, who was attacking with precision and brutality his enemy, who was screaming agony as he was practically mutilated and with blood gushing out of his body. He's not going to kill him, right? Kaminari asked with fear, who felt disgusted when pieces of meat fell from the Nomu, who did not stop screaming in pain. Several looked at each other with concern. That thing perhaps was a person. It would not be the first time that a person has such a monstrous physical appearance due to its peculiarity. Many had doubts about what to think and could only be spectators of the carnage. In front of them. Falling on the enemy, Naruto was going to give the final blow with his sword. What he didn't expect was for Nomu to get up and open his jaw. He bit the sword. Og. Losing the air from his lungs, the shinobi was hit in the center of his stomach. Losing his grip on his sword, it was swallowed by the enormous being that ran against him. The shinobi could barely cover himself when the giant fists of his opponent fell on him. It's useless for you to try to win from a distance. An injured Shigaraki rose from the ground with some minor scratches and burns. The previous explosion affected him, even though the Nomu received most of the explosion. With joy, he watched as the creation of the he was savagely attacking the arrogant blonde who was barely able to cover himself. Nomu was created with the objective of killing All Might. It is designed to withstand even the strongest blows of the symbol of peace. You don't have a chance. Naruto only grunted when he heard the annoying subject. Being on his back on the ground, he suffered the severe blows that were burying him in the ground. Separating his arms, he used them to push himself up and kick the Nomu's chin. Falling into the distance, he tried to think of a new plan of action. However, he didn't have time, since his enemy was already in front of him. Being grabbed by his head, he was hit against the ground, causing a loud crash. The Nomu mercilessly began to run with his victim in the palm of his hand. Leaving a ditch in his path with the Uzumaki's body, he threw into the air. Giving the jump reached him and hit him hard, causing him to fly at full speed against the ground. The shinobi fell brutally, leaving a crater when he collided with a concrete pillar. Brah. But the punishment continued as his foe tackled him, entirely traversing the concrete pillar, dragging it along. With Naruto's left arm in its grasp, the Uzumaki was relentlessly pounded against the ground. Each blow inflicted more wounds on the shinobi, causing blood to stream from his head and back. The Nomu clutched Naruto with its massive hands, mercilessly squeezing his head, attempting to crush it. With his bones cracking under the relentless assault, Naruto clenched his teeth in agony. He raised his left arm, well aware of the fractures and his dislocated shoulders. Glaring furiously at the monster, he retrieved a kunai from his backpack with his only functional arm. Using this arm, he thrust the weapon into the Nomu's left eye, forcing it to release its grip due to the pain. Falling to his knees, the shinobi tried to recover, only to see his enemy's fist stab into his face. He was thrown from the ground and flew through the air until he collided with a wall, becoming embedded, and he saw blood coming down from his mouth. As the creature was suffering from the weapon that stuck in its eye, looking down, it saw that it was only about 20 meters above its classmates. Moving forward, it let itself fall. Before hitting the ground, he felt a long tongue wrap around his torso. Asui slowly lowered the Uzumaki to the ground. Is Uzumaki-san okay? The frog girl asked with concern, retracting her tongue into her mouth. Several of her other classmates also gathered around, observing the shinobi's deplorable state. Break down that door and go, he said slowly as he remained kneeling, aware that some of his ribs were broken and his skull might be cracked. Chapter 19. We can't. "It's an armored door that even with our quirks, it's impossible to break down," explained Midoriya seriously. He had contemplated trying to knock down the door with a single full power blow using his quirk on one of his arms. "We can help you. You can't handle him alone," he said, supported by some of his classmates who were willing to fight. "They can't. They'll only get themselves killed," the blonde responded with utmost seriousness. He brought his right hand to his left shoulder, producing an unpleasant sound. He readjusted his shoulders, moving his arm, and saw that he was feeling better now. Suddenly, his eyes widened as he heard a roar. "Here he comes." Kirishima shouted loudly as he raised his body to activate his quirk. Climbing up the platform, the Nomu with one less eye ran towards the students. Upon reaching the entrance, he charged towards his target. However, on his way, he encountered Bakugo, who aimed his hands at the villain. The grenades on his wrists glowed brightly as he activated the mechanism. "Go down." A deafening roar echoed as the explosion shook the entire platform, causing a part of it to crumble and leaving behind a significant trench of destruction. Bakugo grinned triumphantly. He had defeated the creature that had brutally taken down Uzumaki. His arms trembled from the effort and he took a deep breath. It was the most massive explosion he had ever created. But his moment of victory was short-lived as the Nomu emerged from the dust cloud, completely unharmed. The monstrous beast charged and attacked the stunned Katsuki, who couldn't react as he was knocked to the ground by the Nomu's powerful fist, pinning him down. Raising its massive hands, the dark creature was about to crush the injured and dazed blonde. Just as the villain was about to deliver the finishing blow to Bakugo, Midoriya intervened with a surprise attack, using his quirk on his right arm to strike the monster's head. The impact forced the Nomu to retreat due to the shock and force of the blow, leaving Katsuki stunned and seriously injured. Midoriya fell to the ground, clutching his throbbing arm in pain. "Now, Todoroki-san." He shouted, urging his classmate into action. Todoroki reacted swiftly, using his ice powers to shield Kaken with a massive ice construct that soared over him. The icy projectile hit the Nomu squarely, causing the creature to grunt as a thick layer of ice encased it. In just a matter of seconds, the Nomu was completely entombed within a towering iceberg, reaching the ceiling of the building and standing tens of meters tall. Sighing a visible breath of cold air, the girl with two-toned hair inspected her frost-covered right hand, a frown forming as she stared at the colossal ice mountain that now dominated the platform. She squinted, observing how the figure encased within the ice began to tremble, causing cracks to rapidly spread across the ice, dismantling the icy structure. With a powerful explosion of brute force, Nomu shattered free from the ice prison and charged toward the ice-wielding girl. She barely had time to react as the monstrous creature closed in on her. However, in the nick of time, Naruto lunged forward and tackled the Nomu, seizing it by the torso and hurling it off the platform. Together, they plummeted several meters before crashing onto the unforgiving concrete below. Naruto grumbled as he got back on his feet, clenching his teeth when he saw the Nomu already rising once more. "Just ask for help. You know that thing has the strength of Tsunade's Senju and the speed of a Jounin, at the very least. Even with brute force alone, it's a formidable opponent that can crush you if you keep toying with it," the voice of the Biju echoed within Naruto's mind. He understood where this was going. "You let an inferior being take you down if you don't set aside your pride. You already know the words." The shinobi scoffed, well aware of the impending challenge. "I can handle this without your assistance," he retorted. Bringing his right hand to the seal on his left wrist, he conjured a series of spheres. Tossing them to the ground, he created a dense cloud of smoke that enveloped the entire area. "I'm not giving it my all just yet," he declared before vanishing into the white veil of smoke. "Where is he?" Mineta asked, a tremor of fear coursing through him. Like his companions, he had been observing the entire battle, and now, all they could see was the dense cloud of smoke that shrouded the area. The silence that hung in the air felt oppressive, the tension palpable. But then, the silence shattered as a powerful, resonating snap echoed through the vicinity. The thick smoke dissipated, revealing Naruto in action. He had landed a powerful punch squarely in the Nomu's stomach, causing the colossal creature to stagger backward, struggling to halt its skid. However, Naruto was relentless. He swiftly followed up with a forceful kick, bending the massive foe's back unnaturally. The Nomu was sent hurtling toward one of the many buildings in the area, and upon impact, the 10-story structure quaked and collapsed onto the creature, burying it under tons of debris. Naruto stamped his foot resolutely, demonstrating a slight increase in muscle mass, reddening skin, and bulging veins on his forehead. His Sharingan gleamed intensely, and he assumed a combat stance. His legs were spread apart and bent, while one arm extended with an open palm and a bent thumb pointed at his adversary. The other arm was bent at a 45 angle close to his body. "Third gate Seimin. Kai. Gate of life open," he intoned with determination. Inhaling deeply, the shinobi stood unwavering, his gaze fixed on the rubble concealing the furious Nomu beneath. Chapter 20. Readers, I have already uploaded advanced chapters on Patreon. Also, I have made the first tier 7 days free trial, so you can read for free and enjoy. If you like the work, then you can continue to support me. Patreon-eyed. Skythe. DRRR, with blood trickling down from its missing eye, the Nomu glared furiously at Naruto, who stood his ground. With an animalistic roar, the creature charged toward him, and the blonde shinobi mirrored its action. Before the onlookers, the two combatants collided, creating a powerful shockwave that sent ripples through the ground, knocking down several students. Naruto unleashed a powerful right hook, met by an equally forceful strike from the Nomu. Their mighty blows clashed and nullified each other, generating a formidable clash of forces. Growling, the shinobi yielded to the battle of strength. He backpedaled, narrowly avoiding another blow, and then, bracing his hands against the ground, executed a kick to the creature's midsection. This sent the Nomu soaring into the air, and Naruto pursued, assaulting it with a barrage of punches and kicks, keeping it airborne. Sprinting at full tilt, the shinobi materialized before the Nomu and delivered a crushing downward kick, creating a substantial crater upon impact. The ensuing cloud of dust obscured the Nomu as it became buried beneath the debris. Naruto landed at the edge of the crater, gasping for breath. However, his momentary respite was abruptly terminated when the Nomu emerged from the wreckage, seizing the shinobi's head and ruthlessly smashing it into the ground. The creature viciously raised its massive arms, repeatedly pummeling its fallen foe. With each blow, the crater expanded, and by the 10th strike, it had grown to over 100 meters in diameter and reached a depth of 20 meters. "They're killing him, we have to do something." A Chaco's scream cut through the air, each bone-shaking blow reverberating through the ground, generating powerful shockwaves. The horror etched on the brunette's face was mirrored by her classmates as they bore witness to a boy their age enduring such brutal punishment. "Not Midoriya." Shoji intervened, using his arms to firmly restrain the green-haired teenager who was poised to intervene. "If you act now, not only would you hinder Uzumaki-san, but you'll be risking your own life." The giant's grip was resolute as he held back the determined teen, while the rest of the group turned their attention to the sound of approaching footsteps. With a determined and serious expression, Shiori was on the verge of taking action. The thought of just standing by and watching was unbearable, causing several others to exchange doubtful glances. Their readiness to risk everything for a fellow student became evident as some moved to stand beside the girl with mixed hair. "We must give it our all to buy time until someone else arrives," she asserted. The students nodded in response to their partner's words. Just as they were about to spring into action, they heard a distinct electric crackling sound and the unsettling noise of flesh being sliced. Once again, within the dust-choked crater, a 5-meter-long blade of electricity materialized. Gradually, the electric beam dissipated, revealing its origin in Naruto's right hand as it slowly rose from the ground. Before him stood his motionless enemy, a red line grotesquely splitting the being in half horizontally, separating its legs and part of its stomach from the upper body. The upper portion of the foe slumped heavily to the ground, drenching the Uzumaki's feet in a gush of blood. He watched as his sword, which had been swallowed earlier, fell at his feet. Leaning down, he retrieved his blood-soaked sword and observed as the enemy's legs quickly regenerated. Without hesitation, he raised his sword and thrust it into the Nomu's head. The giant creature spasmed and its regeneration came to a halt. A chilling silence fell over the scene as the Uzumaki sheathed his sword, trembling from the exertion. He glanced at the motionless Nomu, confirming its demise, before shifting his gaze to the last remaining villain. "Impossible," Shigaraki muttered as he stepped back, vigorously scratching his neck until it bled. The creation he had relied on was now lifeless. He was supposed to have vanquished All Might, eradicated the symbol of peace, but here he stood, facing a formidable foe. He approached the shinobi with fury in his eyes, and within moments, they were locked in a tense confrontation, their gazes locked. It was undoubtedly a challenge, but not everything boils down to brute force. Despite his persistent tremors and aching muscles, the shinobi knew that the only way to get the Nomu within striking distance had been to bolster his strength and resilience, using the internal doors. He needed to deliver a crippling blow, one that would incapacitate his enemy, before the Nomu could regenerate. "Who sent you? I doubt someone like you has the ability to genetically alter a person to create that monstrosity." In an instant, the shinobi's right hand tightened around Shigaraki's throat, lifting him off the ground. "I won't ask again who sent you." He repeated the question in a deep voice, choking the villain. Slowly, Shigaraki placed his hands on Uzumaki's arm to lock eyes with him. "All for one." With those words, Shigaraki began to disintegrate. Naruto had to release the villain when he felt an excruciating pain in his arms, as if they were on fire. Dazed, he watched as his skin deteriorated, exposing his red-hot muscles and spilling blood. He cried out in agony, collapsing to his knees. The unbearable pain coursed through him, a result of both the internal doors and this strange affliction from touching the villain. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded angrily, surveying his arm's dire condition. Breathing heavily, he fought to push the pain aside. Rising to his feet, he locked eyes with the villain, who wore an arrogant smile. The villain stepped back just as a portal opened behind him, allowing Kurogiri to rise and form behind his leader. They both vanished, leaving the Uzumaki alone. Damn. He almost got me there. He must have meant to kill me while he could. He underestimated me, not knowing that I possess an ability to decompose flesh at such speed. Surveying his surroundings, he noticed that some of the remaining villains had recovered. However, they all remained as spectators to the Uzumaki's capabilities. "Don't kill us," came a whispered plea from a woman whose hair was composed of snakes. Fear gripped them all as they realized that the boy who had defeated their organization's most potent weapon could easily eliminate them. With his arms still dripping blood, the shinobi regarded the remaining villains. "Why not? You'd kill me if given the chance." His words rang clear, reaching everyone, including the Class A students who were unsure how to react to the Uzumaki's contemplation of finishing off the remaining villains. They will live, just surrender. Understanding the message, the villains dropped to their knees and placed their hands behind their heads. At that very moment, the entrance to the disaster center was blown apart by a thunderous explosion. All Might, with a stern expression, emerged beside the students. He appeared puzzled as he observed the students on the entrance platform. Lowering his gaze, he spotted the Uzumaki, badly injured, and a mutilated corpse of a massive dark being nearby. Numerous people knelt in front of him. Behind them, the second-tier heroes arrived, accompanied by an exhausted Lita. All of them beheld the extraordinary scene before them. All Might and the other heroes watched as the Uzumaki, with evident injuries, calmly limped toward the building's exit. His condition was deplorable, with wounds in various areas of his body. His right arm dripped blood, exposing the torn flesh of his muscles. His jacket was in tatters and soaked in blood, as were his hands. Blood ran down his forehead and trickled along the right side of his body. His face, illuminated by his fierce Sharingan, was a sight that could give nightmares. No one moved or uttered a word as the shinobi, his gait slightly unsteady, exited through the main door, passing the professional heroes and his classmates. A single question lingered in the minds of the recently arrived heroes. What had just happened? Chapter 21. In the dim concrete hallways, the echoing screams of the prisoners filled the air as they witnessed the arrival of a new inmate. Naruto, wrapped in bandages, was escorted by 2 armed guards. He donned an orange jumpsuit, its back adorned with engraved numbers. His hands were ensnared in large handcuffs, and a sturdy steel collar enveloped a substantial portion of his neck. "Fresh meat, guys. We've got ourselves a blonde." One of the many prisoners against the bars exclaimed upon spotting the newcomer. He was a burly tattooed man with a shaved head, wearing the same necklace as the other inmates. He extended his arm through the bars, attempting to grab Naruto's arm. "Welcome to hell, boy." He squeezed the teenager's arm, expecting to elicit a reaction, but all he received was a swift kick that bent the steel bars and sent him flying backward into the concrete walls of his cell. Down, number 889. One of the guards escorting the teenager brandished a control device and administered an electric shock to him. Naruto resisted screaming despite the tormenting jolts coursing through his body. He staggered under the intense pain but refused to fall. Observing this, the other guard prevented his companion from striking the boy with his baton. "He's just a kid. I still can't believe they sent him to this hellhole," he remarked to his partner, shaking his head in disbelief. Ignoring his colleague, the more compassionate guard continued leading the shinobi through the prison's labyrinthine passages. As seconds turned into minutes, they reached the furthest, darkest corner of the prison. Opening a gate, the less aggressive guard watched as the boy, who seemed no older than his own son awaiting him at home, walked slowly into his cell. "I'll make sure you're separated from the most dangerous inmates. Don't draw attention to yourself and keep a low profile if you want to survive," he advised, unlocking the heavy handcuffs from the blonde's wrists. After closing the gate, he observed as the boy entered his cell and settled on the floor. Without uttering a word, the shinobi listened as the guards departed. He gazed at the concrete wall before him, exhaling a sigh. Lowering his gaze, he noticed that the bandages on his right arm were stained red, indicating that the stitches had been torn, reopening his wounds. It had been only a few hours since he had arrived in this place. Closing his eyes, he began to meditate. Flashback. He felt sore and exhausted, longing to depart, mend his wounds, and attempt to heal. Given the extent of his injuries, he doubted he would be fully recovered in just over 4 weeks. While he was in Uzumaki, anyone else would take several months to recuperate from such injuries. He possessed the ability to hasten his healing through methods other than mere waiting, yet he declined the aid of the Biju within him. The Kyuubi would only heal him in cases of life or death, as her own existence was tied to his. With a slight limp from his injured left leg, Naruto departed the rescue center, passing by his classmates and the pro-heroes. In moments like these, he regretted his lack of caution and overconfidence when facing these villains. He had underestimated their abilities, believing that the greatest threat lay within the group. Moving at a slow pace, he heard approaching footsteps. As he looked ahead, he encountered dozens of agents donning heavy gear, resembling a SWAT team. "Stop. Raise your hands where I can see them." One of the agents shouted, pointing his gun at the shinobi, who stood still. The agent reached for his radio, hand poised over it. Surveying the shinobi's condition, he noticed the blood covering him and the absence of a superhero costume with a cape. Their assumptions led them to believe he was a villain. "We have a code number 45B, the agent spoke in a hushed tone, yet Naruto heard him clearly. "A villain is escaping from the scene. We await further orders." Frowning, he continued walking, having no patience for this ordeal. He was already fed up, gritting his teeth while ignoring the sounds of weapons being loaded. However, he was forced to halt when a looming shadow came to a stop behind him, causing the shinobi to cease his steps. He turned to find a solemn All Might. "You need to calm down and come with me. We need to have a conversation," the symbol of peace spoke with gravity, placing his hand on the teenager's shoulder. Naruto shot him a gloomy look. "We must resolve this, and I hope you'll cooperate. Please, young Uzumaki," he added before releasing his grip on the boy's shoulder and turning away to assess the condition of the other students. Naruto clenched his hands in frustration. Was he now the villain in all of this? Would they suspect him for what had just transpired? Would he be apprehended for eliminating that creature? Was it all worth it? "Kid, turn around." An officer approached with handcuffs, attempting to place them on the teenager, but received a swift kick that sent him sprawling. The immediate sound of weapons being readied filled the air. In the distance, All Might halted, looking surprised at Naruto's actions. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm tired of this senseless charade. I've adhered to your senseless rules for far too long, and I'm leaving," Naruto declared angrily. Fuming, he turned to depart. He had tried to abide by their regulations, but he couldn't continue like this. Perhaps being at this academy was a mistake. However, before he could make any more progress, he felt a blow to the back of his neck and everything went dark. Chapter 22. Didn't I warn you about humans? Look at yourself now. The Uzumaki let out a tired sigh, refusing to open his eyes to meet the mocking and arrogant smile of the fox. She continued, "Isn't it sad? You try to do good and yet you always end up being the villain. This is no longer fun. It's just sad." The Biju walked around the Uzumaki, eyeing their cell where they were locked up. She used her tail to gently stroke the shinobi's head, caressing his cheeks. "I wonder how long it will take for you to explode. So much frustration, so much anger, a thirst for revenge. I know you want to get out of here and deal with those who brought you to this place." Frowning, the Renegan displayed annoyance when she noticed that her Jinchuriki continued to meditate, seemingly ignoring her. "Stop pretending that nothing is happening. They locked you up. They should be kissing your feet for saving those useless brats. What are you trying to prove?" She concluded with a loud cry of rage, expecting some reaction from the blonde, but he only opened his eyes. "I can be better. I had a moment of rage, and I lost control. It won't happen again. I have to wait and see what will happen." He ignored the rage-filled look from the Biju and closed his eyes again. At this, the nine-tailed Renegan disappeared. As hours passed, silence filled the small cell where the shinobi resided. However, upon hearing some knocks, he noticed that his cell door opened. He stood up and left his cell. All the prisoners were making their way to the pavilion where they received their food. Ignoring the glances of the other prisoners, he observed that cameras were installed at regular intervals in each corner of the corridors, with guards positioned to monitor every move of the inmates. Walking along the line, he picked up a tray and examined the food they were serving. It could be worse. As he moved through the line, he received a portion of brown puree and a piece of somewhat undercooked meat. When he reached for a piece of bread, he found himself surrounded by 4 individuals, each at least 2 meters tall with robust physiques. Their appearances bore some resemblance to sharks and crocodiles, respectively, and it wasn't surprising that their appearances were linked to their quirks. Observing the gang, he could tell that they were eyeing him with mockery and amusement. "What has this boy done to end up between us?" One of the shark-like prisoners, with bluish scaly skin and a large jaw filled with sharp teeth, asked mockingly. He reached out, snatching a handful of food from the teenager's tray and noisily devoured it, only to then spit it out onto the tray. The action caused an instant reaction among all the prisoners who backed away, keeping their distance to watch what the quartet of shark and crocodile-like inmates would do to the newcomer. "It doesn't seem so tough." The other shark-like being lowered his head and sniffed the air, attempting to detect the scent of blood. He smiled when he noticed the blood staining the bandages on the blonde's right arm. "Maybe it's blood. Looks like we'll have some fresh meat after all." He bared his teeth and approached closer, with his companions following suit, forming a menacing circle around the Uzumaki. "We haven't had a good dinner in a long time. The hybrid creature, part crocodile and part man, opened his jaws wide and lunged at the teenager's head. However, he was sent flying backward as the blonde struck him with the tray, which bent from the force of the blow. The steel plate fell a few meters away and the inmate with scales crashed into the wall, his jaw broken. A dead silence enveloped the area, shattered only when the shinobi retrieved a plastic fork from his sleeve and thrust it into the right eye of the remaining crocodile-like inmate. With a shout, the attacker was kicked and sent sprawling onto a table, earning a taunting remark from the blonde. The blue-scaled shark man threw a punch, but it was effortlessly caught and he was easily thrown against the kitchen counter. As he got up, he found the blonde grabbing him by the head and smashing it against the concrete floor, leaving behind a bloody stain. Naruto glanced at the last remaining aggressor, then grabbed a bowl of boiling oil from the kitchen counter and hurled it. The gray-scaled shark man's agonized screams filled the air. Jumping onto the kitchen counter, the blonde snatched a piece of bread and casually munched on it as he returned to his cell. All the prisoners retreated, clearing a path for the new inmate who had just dismantled one of the most vicious gangs within these walls, at least in terms of cruelty. No one dared to use their quirks within this prison, as doing so would lead to a lethal electric shock from the guards. Disbelief hung in the air, with only the echoing screams and cries of the 4 surviving inmates, serving as a haunting reminder of the consequences of bothering someone they shouldn't have. And we're supposed to let that guy loose. In another area of the country, a meeting was underway between the top heroes and politicians. They were gathered around a screen, watching in repulsion as they witnessed the recent actions of the Uzumaki. Many among them felt bile rise in their throats at the barbarism they had just witnessed. All Might, the symbol of peace, gazed gravely at the screen, observing the teenager's deeds. On one side of the room were the heroes, and on the other were the political figures, including governors and dignitaries, seated in a circle with their desks. Issues? Endeavor, the number 2 hero, spoke doubtfully from beside All Might. He cast a skeptical look at the older hero. What we just witnessed is the act of a psychopath. We weren't training a future hero in young Uzumaki. Instead, we've raised a villain devoid of sanity. A wave of whispers rippled through those present, each sharing their own opinions on the matter. All Might, that boy has a history. Just a few months ago, he killed a villain in cold blood, breaking several laws. While we might have turned a blind eye if he showed potential as a hero, we now have another case of first-degree murder. The victim, Kuromo Sadish, also known as Nomu, underwent a horrific transformation for reasons unknown, but he was still a woman in formal attire, clearly older with gray hair and wrinkles, explained. She held a file in her hands, which she placed on her desk before addressing the symbol of peace. Her words indicated that she had little faith in the Uzumaki. I'm aware of his actions, but I'm prepared to face the consequences, Toshinori replied, unwavering in his belief in the Uzumaki. He knew this case wouldn't be easy to resolve, not just due to the villain invasion, but also the questionable actions of the teenager. I can. Before he could continue, he was interrupted by the same woman who raised her hand, signaling for silence. Chapter 23. That won't work this time, All Might. That boy is a lost cause. As a representative of the National Organization of Heroes, I'm afraid this has escalated into something more dangerous. I have the president asking why a 16-year-old teenager is taking lives and still remains free. The boy deserves a life sentence with no chance of parole for all the charges he's facing. The speaker, a man seated at his desk, lifted a wooden hammer and shuffled some files to the side. I regret to inform you that this boy is sentenced to serve life in the maximum security prison for dangerous criminals, he began to announce when the courtroom was abruptly interrupted by the courthouse doors swinging open. I'm sorry I'm late. Before everyone's gaze, a tall woman with long black hair that fell like a waterfall down her back was shown. She had fine and delicate features, light and white skin without any imperfection, her eyes were dark like her face. Hair that were covered by thin dark framed glasses, she was wearing a gray feminine suit, this being a gray jacket, and underneath it a white shirt. She also had long gray pants, and to finish off some dark high-heeled shoes. The woman had a figure worthy of a model, with large D-cup breasts, a thin waist and large hips. This is Yayoi Rozumajim, it's a surprise to see you here. May I inquire about your presence? The elderly woman, apparently the head of the political figures, asked with curiosity. Yayoi Rozumajim, the black-haired woman, walked to the center of the gathering, holding a briefcase. She calmly opened it and retrieved some files. I am here as young Uzumaki Naruto's attorney, she stated plainly, taking many by surprise, irking some, and bringing relief to All Might. The symbol of peace contacted me and briefed me on the situation. I am here to handle this case, she explained with a composed and serious demeanor. I didn't know you were a lawyer, Ms. Yayoi Rozu, the committee representative expressed annoyance as she glanced at the papers left on her desk by the woman with glasses. There are many things you don't know about me. Walking across the room, she approached the screen and pulled out her phone. With a few button presses, the screen came to life, displaying a video of Naruto rescuing hostages from a giant villain several years ago. "I'm here to defend Uzumaki-san. I've noticed that he hasn't even been given a proper defense, and they're about to convict him without due process," she said, her brow furrowing slightly as she directed her gaze toward the elderly woman, who only raised an eyebrow. "Given the overwhelming evidence I presented, a trial didn't seem necessary," the elderly woman responded. Some in the room appeared doubtful about agreeing with her, while others simply nodded in support. "Didn't seem necessary, huh?" Yaoirozu asked with a hint of irony. She shook her head. "Uzumaki-sen should not be treated this way. We've all focused solely on the deaths he caused, but what about the lives he saved? In his first case, he rescued 3 children and a man who were able to reunite with their families. While he neutralized the villain in an unconventional manner, he did so in self-defense." On the screen behind her, the video showed Naruto defeating the giant villain, but only after realizing that he and the hostages were in imminent danger of being crushed. In the most recent case, he not only prevented the murder of Professor Aizawa, but also saved the lives of 20 UA students. "Your point, Ms. Yaoirozu," the representative spoke with annoyance, observing that some present were now reconsidering their stance on the Uzumaki case. "He not only saved my daughter, who means everything to me, but he also rescued 19 other young people, each with grateful parents, who want to express their thanks to the boy who safeguarded their children. Uzumaki Naruto, despite employing unconventional methods, embodies UA's core principle of risking one's life to save others. That's why I urge that all charges against Uzumaki Naruto be dropped, allowing him to return to the academy and continue being a part of it," the woman concluded. She fell silent as whispers filled the room, where everyone began discussing their viewpoints and opinions regarding the fate of the young man now held in one of the county's top-tier prisons. As minutes passed, the national representative listened to her colleagues and others as they voiced their opinions. Letting out a heavy sigh, the elderly woman struck her desk with a wooden hammer, silencing the room. "Uzumaki Naruto is cleared of all charges. However, there will be several precautions in place to prevent a recurrence of such incidents. This meeting is adjourned," she declared, delivering a final strike with a wooden hammer to conclude the session. Number 889, move. Inside his cell, Naruto remained seated in the lotus position, meditating. He opened his eyes when he heard the banging on the bars and saw a guard approaching. The guard placed handcuffs on the shinobi, who offered no resistance and simply followed him. "Strange," Naruto thought, "I didn't expect to be moved so soon after what I did. I'll have to accelerate my plan." As he walked down the corridor, escorted by the guard, he contemplated his situation. Escaping wouldn't be a problem. It was just a matter of choosing the right moment. They opened several doors and walked for several minutes until they reached what seemed like an interrogation room. Inside, he found a beautiful woman with dark hair and glasses, dressed in a gray suit. All Might, the number 1 hero, was also present. Both of them were seated at a table with an empty chair waiting for him. "It's good to see you, young Uzumaki," All Might greeted him calmly, while the teenager remained serious in response to the hero's presence. "I'm sorry for the need to restrain you like that for your rival," All Might apologized. "Okay, it was necessary. I had lost control," Naruto admitted. He then turned his attention to the woman and asked, "May I ask who you are, miss?" The dark-haired woman raised an eyebrow and responded, "Shouldn't a young man introduce himself first?" She observed Naruto's condition, taking note of the blood-stained bandages on his right arm and left forearm, the bruises on his face, and the strange red eye with tomo patterns, crossed by a scar that extended to his cheek. She couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for the teenager. Chapter 24. "He must know who I am if he's here. Are you Momo Yaoirozu's mother?" The woman couldn't hide her surprise at the blonde's quick deduction, his curious marks on his cheeks drawing her attention. "His eyes, both of them are the same," she remarked calmly as she adjusted herself in her seat. Glancing around the room, she noticed only one door and a glass panel. Although it seemed like there was no way out, she spotted a vent in the upper left part of the wall behind her, a possible escape route. "You have a keen eye, Naruto-kun," the shinobi raised an eyebrow at the change in the older woman's tone. Her voice had softened and taken on a more motherly quality. "Why the change in tone?" The boy, still in pain from his recent ordeal, asked suspiciously. Less than 48 hours had passed since he faced the villains, and the injuries he sustained from the Nomu and forcing open the internal doors continued to torment him, even though he didn't show it. His actions had left several of the prisoners injured, which weighed on him. "It's because you saved the most precious thing I have in this world. You saved my daughter. Not only that, but 20 other families are grateful to you for rescuing their children," the woman in the gray suit and glasses spoke with a faint smile. "Yes, I'll keep that in mind as I spend decades locked within these 4 walls," the teenager replied with a touch of bitterness, his expression remaining serious as he looked at both adults. "I've already taken care of that. The entire city will know what you did and you'll be considered a hero for saving Class A students, young Uzumaki. You must be proud. Did they mention my name? All Might's speech was abruptly halted by the teenager's serious inquiry. No, but we were considering it in a few days, the symbol of peace responded hesitantly before the shinobi interjected. Don't do it. I prefer to remain anonymous. I'm not interested in what the citizens or the other heroes think or say. I just saved some kids. That's all. The teenager's words brought a sense of satisfaction to All Might, confirming his initial impression of the boy. What will happen to me now? He asked quietly, glancing at the mother of one of the few girls who had exchanged words with him in class. Any issues with the conditions we've presented? The black-haired woman inquired about the treatment he had received. However, he didn't bother to read it and simply signed it with his left hand, drawing the lawyer's attention. She decided to speak again. We can provide you with medical attention. UA has a good doctor who could easily treat you, she suggested, concerned for the blonde. But he shook his head as a guard removed his handcuffs, while another guard quickly entered with a box containing his sword and what little clothing he had left after the fight. I don't trust anyone. I'll be my own doctor and I'll tend to my wounds myself, much to the astonishment of both adults present. The teenager began to undress, causing Majim to look away to respect his privacy. The black-haired woman also turned her gaze away, her cheeks flushed. As the teenager disrobed, they both noticed the numerous scars on his back. Boy, how much have you been through? All Might couldn't help but wonder, looking at the teenager's emaciated body. It was as if he had witnessed the aftermath of multiple wars. Each scar was a testament to his survival when others had not. Finally, the shinobi had his pants on and his sword sheathed on his back, held in place by a harness that covered his left shoulder. His dark sweatshirt, stained with dried Nomu blood, was discarded to the side. The teenager was now ready to leave, even if he lacked a shirt or anything to cover himself. Well, I want to leave, so they can put that damn thing on me, and I can go to my apartment. Both adults understood his desire to comply with the imposed conditions and return home. You know what you did was wrong, young Uzumaki. These are the consequences of your actions. Naruto stopped at the room's door upon hearing the number one hero. He turned around, and the gazes of both the older and younger blondes met, creating a tense atmosphere in the air. Uncomfortable, Majim chose to stay out of the situation. Don't talk to me as if I were one of your students. I'm here because you suggested it, and if I want, I can leave, even if I have to fight you to do so, the Uzumaki spoke with clarity, maintaining eye contact with the hero. All Might, in turn, did not back down and maintained his serious demeanor. So, young Uzumaki, what do you consider to be the right course of action? The tall blonde hero asked gravely, unwavering in his upright posture. To ensure they don't repeat this. They not only considered targeting you. They were all thinking about going after Class A. Do you believe individuals who want to harm children can be redeemed? They were willing to kill those kids just to provoke you. For the whim of a psychopath, the lives of 20 young heroes were put at risk. Through gritted teeth, the shinobi's eyes flashed with intensity. However, he let out a deep sigh to calm himself. What would have happened if I hadn't been there? Or if you hadn't arrived? Are you prepared to carry the burden of knowing that 20 promising young heroes, who dreamed of becoming heroes, died because I am not willing to bear that burden on my conscience? All Might had to lower his gaze to the ground upon hearing those words. The truth hit home what would have transpired if neither the Uzumaki nor he had confronted that threat. He doubted any of the other students would have even stood a chance against the Nomu. It could have ended in a massacre. What guarantees that we won't face another attack? That guy is still out there. I should have put an end to him ever since I was a child. I've been taught that taking a life can't save innocent lives in the future. If ending that creature's life ensures that no one else dies because of it down the line, I'll do it. Even if I have to confront that boy face to face and end him with my own hands, I'll do it to safeguard those who deserve to live. But these words, the number one hero turned his back and left the room, leaving behind a palpable tension. As the seconds passed, both adults followed the Uzumaki. Chapter 25. Somewhere in the city, nestled within its lowest and most perilous neighborhoods, our attention shifts to a seedy bar where only two individuals lingered. Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Currently, they were the sole remaining members of the League of Villains, their ranks decimated by defeat, incarceration, or flight. The Mura held a stack of cards in his hands, each featuring the visage of a different Class A student. Gazing over the bar, he plucked a wild card from the deck, its face adorned with the image of Uzumaki Naruto, the very individual responsible for their humiliation and hasty retreat. Did you unearth anything about that arrogant blonde? Shigaraki inquired, singling out the card bearing the likeness of UA's newest student. He's been enrolled at UA for a few weeks, recommended by All Might himself. We couldn't dig up any details about his family, and there isn't much information available. He's undoubtedly an outsider who found his way into Class A, Kurigiri explained with a sense of gravity, his frustration palpable at the limited intelligence they had managed to gather. Shigaraki nodded thoughtfully, pressing all 5 of his fingers onto the card, causing it to disintegrate into a fine dust. Just as he was about to voice his thoughts, both villains were drawn to a television that flickered to life, displaying only a solitary dot. "Stay composed," a deep voice emanated from the screen, soothing the nerves of the young man with light blue-gray hair. "It appears we have an unexpected addition, a new student possessing extraordinary abilities. Not only can he manipulate electricity, but he also has the capacity to enhance his physical prowess to confront adversaries as formidable as All Might. When he emerges, we may have a potential new recruit." Ouch. A sudden exclamation pierced the tranquility of a dense forest. Venturing deeper, we came upon a 6-year-old boy, his hair a shade of blonde, bright blue eyes, and distinct whisker-like marks gracing his cheeks. He dashed swiftly along the forest path, his youthful energy propelling him forward. Eventually, while ascending a tree that towered about 30 meters above the ground, the boy's rhythm faltered. But the kunai clutched tightly in hand, he left a mark on the tree before plummeting to the earth below with great speed, landing with an audible thud. Oni-chan fell again. Buo. Nearby stood a petite 2-year-old girl, adorned in an orange kimono adorned with red patterns. She bore a striking resemblance to the boy, sharing his distinct features, including those endearing marks. Again. She gleefully cheered, applauding her elder brother's exploits. The blonde boy couldn't help but smile at the enthusiastic cheers of his younger sister, Natsumi. His mother had grown busier of late, leaving him responsible for taking care of the little girl. Rising to his feet, he dusted off his clothes. "I think that's enough for today. It's getting dark." With a swift hand seal, he focused his chakra, conjuring an exact replica of himself amidst a burst of smoke. The clone approached his younger sister and scooped her up in his arms. "I'll come pick you up from Aunt Makoto's house later, okay? Have fun with Satsuki-chan and be good." He gently stroked his sister's head and planted a loving kiss on her forehead, prompting a radiant smile from the tiny Reteed, who squealed with delight. "I see you later, Oni-chan." Bidding her elder brother farewell, the little Uzumaki was cradled in the clone's arms, obediently following her brother's directive to take her to the Uchiha household. Once the little girl had departed, Naruto's smile waned, replaced by a more solemn expression. He retrieved the kunai from the ground and flung it towards a distant tree. The leaves of the trees rustled in anticipation of an approaching blizzard. Amidst the woods, a silhouette emerged before the young Uzumaki. "It seems Itachi wasn't exaggerating when he mentioned your exceptional sensory abilities," remarked a 12-year-old boy who gracefully landed in front of the blonde. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise at the newcomer's arrival. It was Shisui Uchiha, a prominent talent among the youth, already a full-fledged jounin at just 12. He possessed a slender frame, bluish-gray hair, and the characteristic pale complexion of the Uchiha clan. His attire bore the Uchiha emblem on the back, and he carried a tanto strapped to his back. "Uchiha Shisui, to what do I owe this visit?" Naruto inquired calmly, his gaze curious as he regarded the teenager before him. "The Gondame sent me to patrol the area and investigate rumors of some Iwachunin lurking here, and based on what I found." Shisui reached into his pockets and produced 2 headbands bearing the rock symbol, both stained with blood. He nonchalantly tossed them onto the ground before locking eyes with Naruto. A tense silence hung between the 2 boys. "They arrived 6 hours ago." Natsumi-chan was napping against a tree while practicing, and they were 2 low-ranking Iowa shinobi seeking notoriety by targeting both children of the Yellow Flash. They were arrogant and thought it would be an easy feat, no issue ambushing them when they least expected it, Naruto explained, and Shisui took a moment to absorb the information. Evidently, the son of the Yellow Flash possessed considerable skill. Casting his gaze toward the tree, he noted that the marks almost reached its top. It seemed this was the first time he had attempted this exercise, yet he had already achieved an impressive height. Observing the boy, Shisui noticed his injured hands and legs, covered in bruises, likely a result of rigorous physical training. "Any progress?" the Uchiha inquired curiously, glancing back at the tree. "I managed to reach this height within a few hours. I began my physical training a year and a half ago. Now, it's time to start with chakra management," explained the young Uzumaki, who directed a perplexed look at the shinobi due to the shift in the conversation. "Impressive. Many take days to accomplish what you've done," praised the shinobi, offering a smile. However, he couldn't help but notice the blonde boy appeared upset. "It's not impressive. Itachi achieved this in just 3 attempts, less than 20 minutes, and you would have done it even faster. Itachi says you were always a genius, even better than him. I'm not like you," the Uzumaki said with a tinge of anger and jealousy in his eyes, clenching his hands. "I lack the natural talent that people like you, Kakashi, Itachi and Myoto-san possess." He wrinkled his face in disgust as he spoke, bearing the weight of feeling like he would forever remain in his father's shadow. The yellow flash of Konoha, a genius who emerges once every millennium. He knew he couldn't meet the lofty expectations everyone had of him. Could he fulfill the promise he made to his father? This question haunted his sleepless nights. You know, there's more to it than just natural talent, the Uchiha said calmly, approaching and resting his hand on the blonde boy's shoulder. Perseverance and hard work can surpass even natural talent. You've spent hours trying to improve, no matter how many times you've fallen. Patting the boy's shoulder, he picked up the headbands from the Iwa shinobi lying on the ground to report back to his leader. Turning his back to him, the blonde boy smiled, looking back at him over his shoulder. I have some free time. If you ever want advice or lessons, don't hesitate to find me. You could even call me sensei, the Uchiha offered with a final smile before disappearing using the Shushin technique, leaving the Uzumaki alone in the forest. Sensei. Chapter 26. Opening his eyes, Naruto found himself in his apartment. He sighed, running his hand over his face, and grimaced in pain as he stood up. His torn muscles were still trying to heal. At times like these, he wished he had learned more about medical ninjutsu. He only knew the basics of healing superficial wounds. Now, he could only endure and wait for his body to deal with his internal injuries and bleeding. Dressed in only pants, he revealed the bandages covering his torso, chest, and arms. Getting out of bed, he began to prepare for his day at the academy. After taking a bath and changing his bandages, he sat in his small kitchen. He had little, to say the least. He didn't like televisions or radios. With a serious look, he noticed cameras placed in various points of his home, watching him. Lowering his gaze, he felt annoyance at the anklet clinging to his right ankle. He was being monitored and guarded in every little action. Drinking a simple cup of tea for breakfast, he savored this brief moment of peace. Once finished, he began to dress in his uniform, already wearing the bandages over his forehead and right eye. With a deep grunt, he adjusted his right arm using a strip of cloth around his neck for support, making it more comfortable to walk. He left his apartment briskly, heading to his destination. As the minutes passed, the shinobi ignored everything around him and simply walked. Finally, after a long journey, he arrived at the academy's imposing doors. However, there was one problem. Dozens of journalists had gathered there, waiting to interview several students who quickly entered the building. Hoping to go unnoticed, Uzumaki tried to make his way through the crowd, but he was soon surrounded by all the journalists present. Uzumaki-san, is it true that you're involved in 2 first-degree murders? Was the first shout from some journalists, their microphones too close to the teenager. He maintained his impassive gaze, walking without stopping. The media entourage followed, hungry for answers. Do you realize that pro-heroes consider you a threat and say you shouldn't be here? A brown-haired woman asked, her question competing with the pushing and shoving of her colleagues. The shinobi continued to walk, ignoring them. Many claim you're some kind of hitman sent to infiltrate UA and eliminate the most promising students. What's your response to these accusations? Another journalist confronted the teenager, thrusting her microphone toward him. His annoyance grew, and as she continued to speak, he snatched her microphone and destroyed it with thin rays of electricity, causing all nearby electronic devices to explode. She retreated in fear. Along the clear path, the teenager ignored the incredulous looks of other students and the angry shouts of journalists upset about their ruined equipment. Upon entering the academy's doors, he saw thousands of students from various courses talking and socializing. However, a hushed silence enveloped the area as everyone noticed Uzumaki's presence. Naruto continued to walk at a deliberate pace, looking straight ahead and paying no mind to the whispers of fear, dread, and discomfort that rippled through the crowd. There's this one, I thought they had expelled him. Did you see those videos that were leaked on the internet? He's a murderer. They say that he saved Class A, but that he almost killed several villains in the process. I still have nightmares when I saw how he killed the Nomu in such a barbaric way. He's a monster. How can they allow someone like him to be here? The whispers all centered on Naruto, who continued his pace, accustomed to being singled out and judged since childhood. It was no different now, but wasn't All Might supposed to ensure that no one would know what happened during the station rescue? Sighing inwardly, he could only endure the scrutiny. I also heard that he lives alone. Maybe he's an orphan. Not even his parents loved him, and they abandoned him. The last comment made Naruto halt his steps and fix his gaze on a dark-haired teenager, the one who had made the remark. Silence fell, and the girl felt the weight of the teenager's penetrating stare. Her classmates moved away, leaving her alone to face Naruto's gaze. Trembling, tears welled up in her eyes. I'm sorry. She took a step back, awaiting someone's intervention. Hearing the heavy steps of the blonde with bandages, she realized he was approaching. On some upper floors, UA professors grew tense, concerned about what might transpire. Some rushed downstairs to prevent any potential trouble. Before they knew it, Naruto was already standing in front of the student. The shinobi cast an annoyed glance at the girl, then approached her. She didn't stop trembling as he stood close and uttered a simple word, "Leave." With those words, the teenager bolted away at full speed, disappearing into the crowds of other 10 students. "Listen up, all of you." The sudden shout from the blonde teenager startled everyone. "I don't give a damn about what you say or think about me. You can call me a murderer, a madman, or even a monster. But I won't let you talk about my family. Now, go." Almost all the students instantly retreated, intimidated and fearful of the shinobi's words. However, some third-year students observed the scene from a distance. "What do you make of him?" asked the blonde boy, crossing his arms as he watched the shinobi head toward his class. When he posed the question, his 2 friends took a moment to ponder. "But he's a potential threat. He's strong, from what I saw in the leaked videos. He could even give you some trouble, Mirio," remarked the dark-haired boy with his hands in his pockets. "I think he's cute, albeit a little temperamental," the girl with long blue hair offered as her opinion. Her 2 companions exchanged doubtful looks and she innocently smiled back at them. "What? Did I say something wrong? If you want to read 25 advanced chapters then go to Patreon and you can support me there." Chapter 27. A few days had passed since the incident at the disaster and rescue station. During this time, Class A had been keeping an eye out for the absence of one of their classmates, Uzumaki Naruto. Speculations arose among them about his whereabouts. Some assumed he was in the hospital recovering from the injuries sustained during his confrontation with the Nomu, while others suspected he had run away. The latter theory gained strength as videos of Naruto's encounters with the giant villain and the Nomu began circulating on the internet and various platforms. Many of the students were unaware of these incidents, leading to divided opinions. They were both frightened and impressed by the shinobi's actions. He had killed the giant villain by beheading him and had pierced the Nomu's head with his sword. While he had ultimately saved them, doubt still lingered about how to react when Naruto returned to class. Momo sat at her desk, staring at a book. She sighed, finding it increasingly difficult to concentrate on her studies. She had talked to her mother and knew that their classmates' condition was delicate. Glancing around, she noticed that her classmates were all in their seats, paying attention to present Mick's lesson. Her gaze shifted to Todoroki, who had been unusually quiet in recent days, though Momo remained unaware of the reason behind it. Knock, knock, knock. The classroom door opened, and all the students turned their heads to see their absent classmate, Naruto, re-entering. He appeared angry, ignoring their teacher, and headed straight for his seat. Walking to the back of the room, he took the seat behind Momo and next to Todoroki. The professional hero glanced uncomfortably at his watch, realizing he had only a few minutes left before his English class would end. He couldn't entirely fault Uzumaki for arriving late, judging by the tense expression on his face. Thankfully, the door opened again to reveal his old friend, Eraserhead. Sighing, President Mick addressed his class, "That's all for today, guys. Read pages 167 to 210 for our next class. Bye." With that, he bid farewell and left the room, leaving behind the dark-haired pro-hero, who had both arms in casts and his face covered in bandages. "Uzumaki, you're getting a 1-hour detention in the penitence room for destroying private media property and frightening a girl from Class 2F in the support class," Eraserhead announced calmly as he looked at the shinobi. Naruto huffed in frustration at his punishment, while the other students looked on incredulously. Aizawa continued as he redirected everyone's attention, "Listen, in a few days, we'll have the sports festival, an annual event. As a result, unnecessary classes will be suspended during that time." He delivered this information in his typical monotone manner. "Sports festival?" Uraraka inquired, her confusion evident. She had heard about these events on television but had never paid much attention to them or understood how they worked. These events help determine which students show the most potential. Depending on their performances, they may receive offers from various departments where they can engage in basic hero training alongside professional heroes who will be observing your progress, Aizawa explained. However, he paused when he noticed Uzumaki's raised hand. "What happens if we refuse to participate?" Naruto asked with boredom, reclining in his chair. "You can't refuse. This is crucial for securing job offers in different hero departments." "That's all for now," Eraserhead explained just as the bell signaled the start of a break. Naruto was the first to rise from his seat and headed to the door without glancing at his classmates. As he stepped outside, he encountered students from various departments. Several students looked uncomfortable at the sight of the shinobi but managed to maintain their composure when they noticed the other Class A students appearing behind Naruto. "What's happening?" Ashido inquired, perplexed by the gathering of students at her class's door. "We came to see Class A. You're the most promising students for the festival and, well, we're here to check out the competition," explained a random student, with several others nodding in agreement. Among them, a boy with gray-purple hair and small circles under his eyes, dressed in the standard academy uniform, maintained a serious and impassive expression as he observed the Class A students. I came to see what these so-called heroes, who survived the villain attack, are made of. But you all seem more like children, and there might be potential villains among you, a colorful group, remarked Shinzum Hitachi, a general studies student at UA. I'm disappointed that this is what the Hero Corps students are like. Did you know there are many students in the general education department and other departments who failed the entrance exam? Based on the sports festival results, they can enter the Hero course for a review, and the reverse can happen too. His gaze lingered on the serious Uzumaki by the door for a moment. At least I, from the general department, won't go easy on you. Consider it a declaration of war, he declared, causing several Class A students to tense up as it became clear that the blue-haired boy wasn't the only one with such thoughts. Already tired of listening to nonsense, the shinobi began to walk among the students, who quickly moved aside. However, when he reached the entrance of the Class B classroom, he found some students from that class blocking his path. He raised an eyebrow, spotting a boy with short blonde hair and gray eyes, wearing an arrogant yet frivolous smile. Isn't it strange that someone like you could be among the potential best heroes of this generation? The boy's question was directed at the shinobi, drawing disapproving glances from his companions. Monoma, an orange-haired girl, attempted to hush her companion, but she halted when the Uzumaki raised his left hand, indicating that no one should intervene. Someone like me? Naruto calmly inquired as he continued walking until he stood before the blonde with a superiority complex. If someone like you behaves like a mercenary, a murderer, or a monster, what are you doing here aspiring to be a hero? All I see is someone with mental problems swinging a sword, killing anyone in the way, Monoma harshly accused, never losing his smile. You're a despicable individual who doesn't belong here. How can anyone trust someone with blood on their hands? I wouldn't be surprised if you sold yourself to the highest bidder for a job, even if it meant killing your own classmates. Isn't that before he could continue, it happened. Everything transpired in an instant. The student lost his breath and felt bile rise to his throat as a powerful knee struck his stomach. Chapter 28. Watch your words, not everyone listens to the trash you say and does nothing about it. The shinobi pushed the gray-eyed teenager, causing him to fall to the ground. He then lifted his gaze, casting an icy look that left the other students in the class tense and uncomfortable. Without further interaction, he passed by the fallen boy and left the place. Exhausted. For a moment, Naruto's expression turned melancholic and sad as he reached the courtyard of the Grand Academy. He took a deep breath and observed several trees adorning the vast green meadow before him. Listening to those remarks had become draining. It wasn't just dealing with the rejection and fear of his classmates. Now, the entire academy and the media treated him as if he were a monster. It wore him down knowing there were hardly any people left who wouldn't point fingers and judge without considering the full story. With a quiet sigh, he leaned his shoulder against a tree. Are you okay? Naruto tensed upon hearing a female voice. Looking down, he spotted a 15-year-old girl with a pale complexion, dark eyes, and unusual green hair that resembled vines. She wore the standard UA female uniform, and a silver cross hung from her neck on a chain, catching Naruto's sharp eye. She held a book in her hands with the word Bible engraved in gold on the cover. Naruto mumbled, curious about the girl's expression, which displayed a mixture of curiosity and slight concern. She sat on the ground, leaning against a tree while reading her book. It was strange. Yes, it's just a bad day, he admitted, then joined her on the grass, surprised to see that she continued reading, maintaining her gentle smile. You don't know who I am, do you? Naruto asked, gazing at the leaves falling from the trees in response to a gentle breeze. Yes, he replied simply, closing his Bible and retrieving a lunchbox from beside him. Opening it, he revealed several pieces of bread and some strawberry candy in a jar. With a knife, he carefully prepared 2 sandwiches, filling them with the candy. When he finished, he offered one to the shinobi next to him, who accepted it with hesitation. Closing her eyes, the girl whispered a brief prayer before starting to eat. You're the first person who hasn't judged or rejected me in days, the shinobi admitted between bites of the surprisingly tasty sandwich. He shrugged and continued eating. Do not judge, or you will be judged, recited the green-haired teenager, giving the blonde teenager an understanding look. I'm aware of your actions, but I'm not one to judge you. Only our Father in heaven can. She noticed the Uzumaki's puzzled expression and blushed slightly, looking away. I'm sorry. I was lost in my thoughts. I'm Ibarashai's Ashi, she introduced herself, extending her hand to shake the Uzumaki's. Uzumaki Naruto, the shinobi replied simply, still looking curious about the teenager. Are you some kind of believer? That was his conclusion based on what he had seen so far. He had encountered that book and necklace before in various places. I'm an evangelist or a Christian, whichever term you prefer, she said without hesitation, clutching the Bible in her hands. She was proud of her beliefs, but most people, upon learning about her faith, either distanced themselves from her or pretended to be understanding. Being in Japan and following a religion that less than 0.1% of the population practiced was not easy. Her parents had come from abroad in their youth, seeking a better life in Japan. She was born in Japan, but had always shown a strong inclination for the teachings her parents shared about their Heavenly Father. She never felt ashamed of her faith and took pride in trying to share it with others, even though she hadn't made much progress so far. Breaking free from her thoughts, she noticed the blonde teenager extending his hand toward her. "Can I?" he asked, gesturing towards the green-haired girl's book. She hesitantly handed it over to him, and he carefully opened the Bible to read it. As he turned the pages, minutes passed, and the nervous teenager beside him watched him intently. Eventually, Naruto closed the book and returned it to the green-haired girl. "It's a good path you're following," he commented calmly, surprising the girl who had expected ridicule for her beliefs. "Thank you. Do you believe in God?" she asked, inching a bit closer to the blonde, who was gazing at the academy. "We all believe in something. Personally, I consider myself an atheist, but it's never wrong to believe that there's someone up there watching over the people you care about. Ibara-san, don't expect me to declare that your faith is correct, but how do you reconcile your beliefs with the state of this world? Do you truly believe there's a God who allows all the suffering?" he asked, adopting a more serious tone and looking directly into the student's eyes. "The world is filled with corruption, people killing each other, hunger, senseless wars sending young lives to their deaths, women and girls being subjected to horrifying acts. How can I believe?" He posed these questions without averting his gaze from the girl, who clutched her Bible to her chest. "I don't have answers to those questions. All I know is that our Father gave us life and allowed us to inhabit this earth for some purpose. He didn't just grant us life. He gave us the most precious gift of all. Free will," Ibara replied. She looked down, gently caressing the small cross hanging from her neck with her fingers. "We can't blame God for the state of the world. Each person must take responsibility for their actions and confront their sins. If our Lord Jesus Christ were to intervene in every decision we make, we would lose the invaluable gift he bestowed upon us. Perhaps he placed us in this world to face the challenges it presents and to overcome them, learning to distinguish between good and evil, so we may be deemed worthy of standing at his right hand in heaven. I understand that believing can be challenging, and doubts about our Father's existence may creep in, but sometimes, you simply have to have faith." A profound silence lingered between the two teenagers, their gazes locked on each other. Naruto was taken aback by the strength of the girl's faith. Was it as simple as having faith for her? Believing despite everything? With a furrowed brow, he gazed at the sky. "So, is that why you don't judge me? Because of a commandment in your book?" he inquired, intrigued by the conversation. Did he himself believe in Kami-sama or God? He believed there was something more to this world than met the eye. Chapter 29. Ibara pursed her lips, her gaze shifting away in response to the question. After taking a deep breath, she spoke again. "Everyone says you're a murderer, but you killed to defend yourself. The only question I have for you is, do you like shedding blood and taking lives?" She posed a query without hesitation, creating a tense and heavy atmosphere between them. "No," came the simple response from the shinobi, who continued to gaze into the distance, all the while being scrutinized by the girl. "Do you regret what you've done?" she asked again, this time with Ibara summoning the courage to firmly grasp Naruto's hand. He had to meet her gaze this time. "Do you regret every wrong you've committed thus far?" For a moment, silence enveloped them, the only sound being the rustle of the wind. "There isn't a single day that I don't," several images flashed through the blonde's mind. He carried a long list of things he wished he could have changed, but life rarely unfolded as one desired. "I've made too many mistakes, but if I don't make the toughest decisions, who will? I know I have unforgivable sins, Ibara-san. I know that in the eyes of your Lord, I'm destined for hell, but I'm willing to go if it means preventing those who deserve death from causing more pain. Maybe I won't earn the gates to paradise, but I can ensure that good people get to live peaceful lives at my expense." As he began to rise, he paused when he felt Ibara's grip on his left hand tighten. "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, slander, and all malice be put away from you. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ forgave you." Ephesians 4:31 and 32, the teenager recited from memory without letting go of the shinobi's hand. "If our Heavenly Father forgave us when we killed his son, you can forgive yourself for your own mistakes. No one is perfect, Uzumaki-san. We all make some mistakes more than others, but there is no sin that cannot be forgiven by our Father. Killing, though one of the worst sins, I can see that you truly regretted." Releasing Naruto's hand, the girl stood up, keeping her Bible and cleaning her uniform of all dirt. "If you ever need someone to lean on, you can count on me, Naruto-kun." Giving a slight bow, she began to walk away as the bell signaling the end of the break rang. Naruto remained silent, watching the teenager depart. Slowly, he made his way back to his class, lost in his thoughts, constantly reflecting on what the young believer had said. Upon arriving at his class, he waited for the school day to conclude so he could return home. He had no desire to interact with his classmates. He was weary of everything and simply wanted to rest. When the final bell rang, he wasted no time in leaving the classroom. He limped through the hallways, his thoughts heavy. At times like these, he was tempted to ask the sealed entity within him to heal him, but the price she demanded was too steep, even for him. As he reached the academy's exit, he heard approaching footsteps. He stopped and found himself surprised to see nearly all the members of Class A, with the exception of Bakugo, Todoroki, and Mineta, rushing toward the entrance. Momo, who appeared to be leading the group, called out to him. Naruto waited, calmly facing the group of students. Many seemed unsure, with Momo, Midoriya, Iida, and Hagakure standing at the forefront, while others provided support from behind. "We know what everyone says about you, and we just want you to know that no matter what, you're still our teammate. You saved our lives," Midoriya spoke confidently, a noticeable change from his usual stuttering. "Even if everyone thinks you're crazy, you can always count on us. We're your friends." Toru's flowing uniform moved up and down imperfectly, emphasizing his excitement. "You yourself said that you consider us your comrades. We consider you our comrade too." Several heads nodded in agreement with the invisible teenager's words. "I shared with them what Oka-san told me." Momo approached the group at a cautious pace until she stood just a few steps away from Naruto. "You nearly lost your life protecting us. We're sorry you had to face prison for us. Some of us still feel uneasy, and I won't deny that your methods can be intimidating at times, but we want to be your comrades, your friends, regardless of your demeanor." A moment of silence enveloped the academy's exit, with Class A students anxiously awaiting Naruto's response. Naruto's faint smile conveyed more than words ever could, bringing smiles to the faces of the future heroes as well. Perhaps it was indeed time to forge new bonds. Chapter 30. He had to be better. All his teammates were training hard, and he couldn't be an exception. Tomorrow marked the beginning of the sports festival, a crucial day where he needed to shine, to declare to the world, "Here I am." And show everyone what he was capable of. The symbol of peace, All Might, had entrusted him with this task, and he couldn't afford to fail. This was his chance to fulfill his dream of becoming a hero. Izuku was well aware of the many obstacles he had to overcome and the strong competitors like Kaken, Todoroki-san, and Uzumaki-san. He needed to train relentlessly to match their strength. With a final cry of effort, Izuku completed his 10-kilometer run along the beach without stopping. It was the same route he had trained on with All Might. The number one hero was absent these days, as security for the upcoming festival was paramount. After the run, the exhausted teenager caught his breath. He wore a green sweatshirt over a white t-shirt, dark sports pants, and his signature red sneakers. Taking a moment to rest, he gazed at the horizon where the sun was slowly rising, painting the dawn sky. Izuku is already rested, he almost jumped in surprise at the voice. Turning around, he spotted his classmate Uzumaki Naruto, sitting just a few meters away on a raised concrete block amidst the sand, in a lotus position. "Hello, Uzumaki-san." Izuku greeted nervously, standing up stiffly to acknowledge the blonde teenager, who remained impassive while staring out at the sea. "Call me Naruto. I'm tired of being so formal at that academy, and I don't want to do it here either," the shinobi spoke calmly, remaining in his meditative position. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes again to resume his meditation. "Okay Naruto," Izuku replied with uncertainty, approaching the teenager with marks on his cheeks. When he got closer, he observed Naruto's trance-like state with curiosity. "It seems your training method involves meditation, not just seeking enlightenment, but also mental and physical training. Your muscles are tense, and it looks like you're pushing yourself to the extreme. Is this how you achieve such strength? Pushing your muscles beyond their limits?" Naruto's eyebrow twitched in irritation at the constant whispers from the green-haired teenager beside him. "Izuku," he growled softly, pulling the freckled boy back from his contemplative thoughts. Sighing, Naruto regarded the teenager with curiosity. "Do you always train at this time of day?" he inquired, relinquishing his training. He had been meditating for almost 6 hours, stimulating his muscles for strength. Training this way was challenging, but in his current condition, he had limitations. They were watching him, and his body had not fully recovered. "Yes," Izuku answered, blinking in confusion. He looked at Naruto with curiosity. "I wake up at 5 a.m. every day to train. I head home at 8 a.m. to get ready and then go to the academy at 9 a.m. After classes, I continue training from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. I do it as much as I can every day," he explained earnestly, never missing a day of training since inheriting One for All. Naruto maintained his serious, analytical expression, but couldn't help feeling a degree of respect for the determined boy. He then asked, "Your quirk is from All Might, right?" His question left Deku flabbergasted. "Who told you?" Izuku exclaimed in shock, not expecting his closely guarded secret to be revealed. "You just did," Naruto responded with a sly smile. He stood up and jumped down onto the sand as the sun slowly rose, marking the start of a new day. "There's a lanky guy, not to mention a skeleton, hanging around the academy. His appearance bears a striking resemblance to All Might, his hair, dark eyes, and pupils. Plus, both All Might and this guy have talked to you a lot. It's suspicious. I've got two theories. Either you're All Might's child, but that's unlikely considering your vast aesthetic and physical differences. Or somehow, the symbol of peace passed part of its power to you. I honestly didn't know quirks could be transferred." Naruto's analysis left the boy in front almost having a cardiac arrest. Naruto sighed and began to walk away from the green-haired boy. "If it's such a secret, you should be more careful. We all have our secrets, Midoriya, and I'm not one to reveal them," he said as he prepared to leave. However, he heard Izuku following behind him. "Wait. Why are you saying this? I thought you would be resentful for what they did. Don't take it the wrong way, but this secret could be valuable to you. Why not use it?" Strangely, Deku spoke with gravity and seriousness, abandoning his usual shy and undervalued demeanor, emphasizing the importance of the secret. Humming to a complete stop, Uzumaki turned to face the green-haired teenager. "Because I understand the potential harm this secret could cause. All Might isn't just a hero. He's a symbol, an ideal that many aspire to, including yourself. He's your inspiration, your idol. You want to be like him, to save people with a smile. His mere presence makes villains cower and hide. Can you imagine what would happen if the symbol of peace appeared as a frail, skeletal figure on death's doorstep?" The question sent a shiver down Deku's spine, and he swallowed hard. It was a question he hoped would never be answered. The entire society would crumble. Chaos and countless deaths would ensue as villains, emboldened by his weakness, run rampant. You and I both know that for every hero, there are at least 100 people who wouldn't hesitate to take their place. We'd revert to the time when quirks were just emerging, only now, with 90% of the world's population possessing powers they shouldn't have. It would be a war with no winners, only losses. A tense silence enveloped both teenagers as they exchanged looks. Two vastly different individuals, yet sharing the same ultimate goal. Saving people so they could have a future. Naruto Midoriya leaned forward, his head bowed. "I know I'm practically useless once I unleash an attack, and I can't keep losing my limbs or fingers in fights that don't guarantee victory. I know you have two quirks, like Todoroki-san, you can manipulate electricity and enhance your body for incredible speed and strength. I'm asking for your help. Please, help me become better." He finished with a firm plea, remaining bowed in anticipation of Naruto's response. Still standing on the sand, Naruto looked at the freckled boy. He could have chosen to ignore him and continue on his way, especially when training someone who could self-destruct using their power. Where's the fun in it if it's too easy? With his right arm, still recovering beneath his sweatshirt, he moved it to confirm that it was functional but still sore. He cracked his neck with a shake of his head and sighed. "Alright, I'll give you some advice and guidance to help you unlock your potential. Follow me." Turning his back to the eager young hero, he began to walk, closely followed by Deku. What if Naruto x My Hero Academia harem end here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.